And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, bees and squirrels. Alright, I'll stop, sorry. I was getting into my Dr. Seuss bag there for a second. Let's keep this intro brief so then we can swiftly get into the real meat of this video. The in-depth and thorough deconstruction of one of the greatest shows to ever grace this often fiendish and sadistic ball of dirt, water and oxygen that we call home. BoJack Horseman and the Seven Dwarfs. BoJack Horseman, sorry. I was recently looking into all the Snow White drama. Anyways, moving on. For those who have not watched part 1 of my series, I strongly suggest that you take your behind and watch the first video. Please. Give me more views. But in all seriousness, I'd advise that you watch part 1 of the breakdown series so you are fully briefed on the story of BoJack Horseman up until season 2, which we'll be tackling in this video. For those who don't care to do that, or for those who have already watched part 1 of my breakdown series, but would also like a brief recap on season 1 and how we've gotten to where we are, I've got you. We are taken into the life of BoJack Horseman, a once well-known and vastly liked celebrity who starred in a show called Horsing Around, a show that played a pivotal part in BoJack's life and elevated him out of the life of mediocrity that he fears. BoJack is tasked with writing a book, a biography of his life, but after extended lengths of procrastination and writer's block, he accepts his inability to write a best-selling novel that would be able to put him back in the spotlight, something that he'd been away from ever since his role in Horsing Around ended many years prior. He hires a ghostwriter who's called Diane, who gets to know BoJack on a more intimate level, an important step for her to be able to write a book that would shed a light into the subtleties of BoJack's mind, shed a light into his life as well as his past experiences, something we learn that BoJack does not want. What he does want is a lie. To be seen as greater than he actually is, to be portrayed as somewhat perfect. Todd is BoJack's friend who has been living with him for multiple years. You may be wondering why. Well, BoJack has a crippling fear of being alone. We learn that BoJack is honestly just disguising this fear as generosity. Fear influences BoJack to commit morally deplorable acts. Acts such as sabotaging Todd's opportunity at financial freedom that would have given him an opportunity to move out. And he did that despite always belittling Todd and frequently telling him how much he'd rather be alone. Princess Carolyn is a fierce and feisty businesswoman who is focused on her career and is BoJack's agent. She's also BoJack's ex-girlfriend and has a weak spot for BoJack, one that BoJack takes advantage of constantly. Mr. Peanut Butter is a character that's introduced to us early on, and a character that BoJack can't really stand, mainly because of his sometimes overbearing personality, or the fact that BoJack perhaps harbors some jealousy towards him. We slowly start gathering more and more information about BoJack's difficult past, and reasons contributing to why he's not the most well-adjusted person. Abuse, neglect, and a childhood where he felt like nothing but a burden to those who were meant to love him the most. Season 1 takes us on a lot of different adventures and shenanigans that the characters get up to, like a very public disagreement between BoJack and a Navy SEAL about who had rights to a pack of muffins, BoJack reconnecting with a co-star from his days on Horsing Around, Sarah Lynn, who at the time when they worked together was a child. Sarah Lynn, as we'd come to learn, grew up with a neglectful mother, unfortunately looking up to BoJack, who only led her further astray. Upon reuniting many years in the future, mayhem begins, and eventually at some point, BoJack and Sarah Lynn end up having intercourse. I know. What the fuck, BoJack? We become privy to Diane's own undesirable upbringing, whilst she visits her family after finding out her father had passed away. Further evidence to the impact of nurture as a major factor in the outcome of a developing mind. Diane, who by the way is Mr. Peanut Butter's girlfriend, is proposed to, and this is a heart-wrenching moment for BoJack because through the episodes a connection between BoJack and Diane forms and grows stronger and stronger. Emotion so strong that BoJack had even stolen the D from the Hollywood sign for Diane. This news makes BoJack resort to what he typically does, drinking his sorrows away and trying to take advantage of Princess Carolyn's emotional soft spot for him. All this to fill the void within himself and escape the loneliness. But as per usual, like clockwork, he breaks her heart once again. In the latter half of the season, we gain more knowledge on how BoJack got the opportunity of being the horse from Horsing Around, and we are properly introduced to Herb during a flashback. Herb was at one point in time BoJack's best friend, bond that would gradually fizzle away over time. Herb was the one who had given BoJack the opportunity of a lifetime to star as the lead actor in Horsing Around, and with that opportunity we began to see the real side of BoJack as his fame grew. Rude, the selfish, and just plain unlikable. The fame had gotten to his head. A scandal involving public indecency had put Herb in a bit of a pickle. However, the reason this was a major issue was because it was public indecency with another man, and the world was far less inclusive in the past. Said incident led to conservative parties pushing for him to get ejected from the show. After BoJack's half-assed attempt to try and save his once close friend's job, Herb was fired, and they never spoke after that. At least not for a very long time. That was until many years later when BoJack visits him after learning about his terminal illness. The visit leading to a bubbling of emotions ending with a brawl between the two. Herb had no intention of ever forgiving BoJack and giving him that satisfaction. The thing that hurt him the most was the fact that BoJack was never there for him after he was fired. Not once. Not ever. BoJack tries to murder any chance of the wedding between Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane going through, concocting evil schemes and attempts to get the wedding called off. He even recruits Todd to help him, who later decides not to after feeling too guilty about his actions. And after firmly speaking to BoJack, he ensures that BoJack does not go through with whatever sick plans he has in his head. The wedding goes through without a hitch, and BoJack, like he often does, feels like a broken man. Nearing the end of this season, whilst BoJack is starring in a project that ends up windmilling its way into complete nonsensical mayhem, he has an opportunity to read Diane's now complete book about him. Things didn't go well, and he was very unhappy with the realness in which she depicts his reality. He rejects the book, which then results in Diane leaking a few pages of the book in anger, and that is then followed by BoJack firing her. Now, this was around the time that Todd had become aware of what BoJack had done to ruin his chances at becoming a rock opera star. It was one of the only times we genuinely see a hurt and angry Todd. They become friends again an episode after, but what BoJack did will likely linger in the back of Todd's mind. A grain of discontent that will likely grow with every additional act of selfishness and cruelty from BoJack. In attempts to prove to himself and his publicist that he does not need Diane to write a best-selling book, he undergoes the journey to write the book by himself once again. He does acquire the help from Todd and Sarah Lynn, but their collective attempts to write a book that could rival the likes of Harry Potter and grow to amazing heights ends up in a chaotic drug bender, where through visual representation we get to embark on a journey through BoJack's mind, a journey filled with fear, emptiness, loneliness, the unpleasant experiences pilot BoJack's thoughts towards really discerning the extent of his capabilities and coming to terms with the fact that he does in fact need Diane. He later finds Diane and pleads for forgiveness and begs for confirmation from her that she at least sees a morsel of goodness in him. She says nothing, and BoJack is left to marinate in the desperation of his own words. Now, fast forward a while after BoJack's biography was published. BoJack is a massive success and has a beaming light of attention around him that he's been craving for a very long time. Diane too is now a massively successful best-selling author with an upwards trajectory in life. Now that BoJack had become a much more esteemed name in Hollywood, he harbored a lot more power and was able to pull a few more strings and have a film called Secretariat made. A film about his childhood hero. Secretariat was a man BoJack looked up to as a child, someone who he could relate to in an unrelatable world, and amidst the difficulties of his upbringing, a man who too was troubled. BoJack of course auditions for the lead role and is now to play the lead in the movie as Secretariat. Diane is also part of the film as a character consultant, a job that she decided to do over traveling to a third world country and documenting the daring adventures of Sebastian St. Clair, who is this rich, really obnoxious sounding guy who is also doing a lot of good deeds by helping people in third world countries. Although her decision was not made without serious consideration. The season pretty much finishes with BoJack, despite having the attention and fame that he's desired, the adoration to substitute the loneliness he feels. It wasn't enough, and BoJack still feels alone. just as devoid of joy, just as wretched. So, now that we have that recap out of the way, let's dig into the main course. I hope you have your snacks prepared. What have you got? Popcorn, chicken, chocolate, pizza? Hey, don't forget to drink as well. Comment down in the comment section what snacks you guys have. I'll see if you've got decent taste. But anyways, let the breakdown begin. Episode 1 starts us off by recalling back to episode 12 of season 1, where we are shown a letter to Secretariat from BoJack that is being read on TV, followed by Secretariat offering some advice to the then young BoJack, advice that BoJack was listening to attentively, while an argument between his mother and father, something that he unfortunately witnessed very often, would erupt in the background. We see the tumultuous relationship between Mr. and Mrs. Horseman and the dark and toxic environment that BoJack was embedded in. We gain further knowledge and understanding of the extent of the negligence and lack of accountability from BoJack Horseman's mother as this season begins to delve more deeply into her history and mind. A cloud of poison that never ceases. Poison that is inhaled and held in the lungs of BoJack till it became part of him. Until he became part of it. An unfortunate product of an unfortunate environment. His mother blames everything on him. All her failures, all her faults, all her mistakes. To have such a burden at such a young age, the burden of always feeling like a burden, a cruel gift bestowed onto him by his mother, who was only a mother by blood, but not by her character, nor was she by her actions. BoJack is told that he ought to grow up to be something significant to make up for all the damage that he has caused by simply being born. Good gosh, woman. You are absolutely awful. One can very easily imagine how situations like this surely spawn internalized feelings of never being good enough, a trauma that affects BoJack heavily in his adult life. There's a particular line that BoJack's mother says.
Don't sit so close to the TV. It'll make you cruel.
Don't sit too close to the TV, it'll make you cruel. The first time I'd heard it, I thought nothing of it. But having watched this episode multiple times at this point, I feel as though there was more to that sentence. That there was a message behind it, perhaps a metaphor. But about what? I thought very deeply about it, and there were multiple interpretations that I gathered from it. The meaning that I feel was the intention placed on it by the writers is that it's an allegory of the effects of Hollywood and a foretelling of BoJack's future. He got too close to the TV symbolizing fame and stardom as an actor, and that very same fame amplified all the toxic and undesirable things about him. It turned him cruel. Now, in the present day, we see that BoJack is taking steps towards change. He wants to be better, to do better, marching headfirst in a pursuit of conquering his bad habits and self-destructive behavior. However, for any change to stick, he needs to tackle the traumas of his past to unlock true understanding within himself. It's with this that he can then start making smarter, more educated decisions and become a better person. Just putting on a guise of jubilation and enthusiasm whilst listening to motivational audio is unlikely to result in permanent change. Without delving into himself and asking himself the hard questions like, why is he so afraid of being alone? Why he pushes everyone that loves him away? Why does he feel so empty inside, no matter how much he accomplishes? Without tackling that and answering those questions, every other change will likely just remain superficial and temporary. This is BoJack Horseman we're talking about after all. But we'll see. Princess Carolyn is somehow still with Vincent. How is this gag still a thing? Look, I'm aware there are people who absolutely love Vincent, but I was never really a fan. There have been perhaps 2 or 3 moments involving the character that have actually resulted in a slightly audible laugh, but definitely nothing to write home about. Overall, I felt like the joke died very quickly and the gimmick swiftly lost its appeal. Look, I was just surprised that he made it to season 2. BoJack's enthusiasm towards becoming a better version of himself is palpable, and for a short while it looks like perhaps this was the journey of BoJack becoming a great person. But deep down we all knew this wouldn't last. BoJack, who is soon to be shooting scenes for his role as Secretariat, anticipates a great day, as this was the day he'd start acting in a movie about an individual that he idolized since he was a child. And also an opportunity for him to demonstrate his acting skills outside of a sitcom. Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane are still together and things seem to be going alright. Diane, who is a character consultant for the Secretariat movie, is picked up by BoJack, who is, to Diane's surprise, and to mine as well, even treating Mr. Peanut Butter with some respect. Something you don't see very often. It's often a landslide of resentment on BoJack's part, and seemingly ignorant blissfulness to said resentment from Mr. Peanut Butter.
Mr. Peanut Butter, how the hell are ya?
Loving it, buddy. Loving life.
Brother, I am right there with you.
But this interaction was discernibly different. We later meet up with Kelsey, director for the film, who for whatever reason has a substantial fascination with Todd's face, which is brought up multiple times. It's absolutely random, but the assertiveness in Kelsey's delivery makes the moment funny.
Who let this guy in? He's got a real funny face. I like your face, guy.
Thank you.
What a cute, funny face. You want a cookie? Can someone get this guy a cookie?
Diane's role as a character consultant appears to not be exactly what she expected, and very little responsibility is actually put onto her. And Diane, being a person who lives to be occupied and has an inner urge to escape any form of mediocrity, the want to make a difference and change the world, simply is not fulfilled with the role she finds herself in. Such problems of her fear of not making a difference in life or living a life of repetition and complacency will continue to arise as we move through the season. This is BoJack's first day acting on set. He's big and bold, returning to acting, into Hollywood, into stardom, and a chance to do justice to his childhood idol. But oh no, whatever is it? It seems BoJack is having a really hard time acting. Hard time acting well, at least. This wasn't the talent and capability that he demonstrated during his audition. No, not even close. The acting is downright terrible, and he can't seem to break free from the over-exaggerated and simply hammy style of acting from his days of horsing around. Perhaps BoJack doesn't have the acting capabilities he thought he did. Perhaps horsing around was the extent to his range. Perhaps his audition wasn't him acting, but instead just a sincere moment of recollection and self-analysis that he felt throughout his body while reciting the lines during the audition. Or perhaps he's just got cold feet and he's nervous. We'll see. But for now, filming is pushed back. The entire set was destroyed after an assistant trips over some thick-ass wires that Diane had been designated the job of making sure no one tripped over, but clearly didn't do what was asked of her in attempts to try and contribute more significantly on set. Let's just say Diane and Kelsey aren't best friends at the moment. We are shown a flashback of the first time BoJack's mother had seen BoJack's TV show live. BoJack had made it. Her son had made it. Now you'd expect at least a hint of pride and joy, but no, there's nothing but unnecessary hurtful insults thrown at BoJack's efforts. A cruel, broken woman with a heart as bitter as lime. That was what Beatrice Horseman was. You can tell deep down all BoJack wants is her approval, for her to be proud of him and acknowledge how far he has come. But she has a much more wicked and warped sense of reality.
You don't know how lucky you are to have me. I hope you die before I do, so you never have to know what it's like to lose a mother.
Well, as long as one of us dies, that's good enough for me. Can we please get some alcohol into my mouth?
Now, Beatrice has her own trolley of baggage and deep-rooted tormenting traumas. Things in her past and her childhood that had accumulated and steered her into the unfortunate direction of becoming a terrible excuse for a person and a mother. Don't worry, at some point in the future we'll be diving into her backstory. But not right now. Not this season. Oh boy, is this show filled with an abundance of unadulterated depression. Goodness. Beatrice views her mere presence at BoJack's show as more than what BoJack deserves from her. This should have been a prideful moment for her, but all we see is the extraordinary lengths of her blatant narcissism. We return back to current day, and BoJack is really starting to second guess things and contemplating his self-worth, wondering if he's good enough. During a car ride with Diane, as BoJack's facade of enlightenment and betterment starts to crumble away, we get wind of BoJack's prevalent grudge on Diane for his biography that she wrote, and it's now pretty clear that his positive steps forward seem to be unraveling. Around midway through the episode, we are acquainted with Rutabaga, a new character that appears to have a really good friendship with Princess Carolyn, who works a floor above him on floor 27. He's a rather unabashedly enthusiastic person, but truthfully speaking, from the first time the show introduces him, I had a bad feeling about him. I felt like something was off. My gut was screaming that he was fake, and later on I'd come to find out that my feelings were justified. But we'll get to that later. As the episode continues to progress into the latter half, BoJack is slowly regressing back into his former self. If we're being honest, that version of him never left. The real BoJack was simply waiting for any obstacle that life could throw at him to appear once again. Let's just hope he doesn't get too consumed in the darkness and is able to see the light. As they are in the car, Diane witnesses BoJack in complete meltdown and panic over Secretariat. She tries to help him by suggesting that he gets an acting teacher and does some character research on Secretariat. Perhaps that would get him in the zone to deliver a more authentic and genuine performance. Now, you'd think that after agreeing to the advice suggested by Diane, that he'd actually do what she recommended, to put him in a better spot for the next time he's on set. But let's not fool ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, it is BoJack we're talking about, right? What does he do? Well, he deduced that the best course of action would of course be to procrastinate the entire time he had till he was next needed on set. Despite not seeming interested enough to put in the work to improve himself, BoJack's yearning for happiness and fulfillment remains a heavy weight on his heart and mind. But he continues to search for that elusive feeling of inner happiness in the wrong places. He hopes this role as Secretariat will bring him fulfillment and happiness, that it will make him feel complete. But unless he finds joy within himself, he will never truly be fulfilled. And something like being cast as Secretariat in a movie will not bring him that joy and contentness of self, only a temporary satisfaction. Quickly transitioning to Diane, she's clearly just not satisfied with her life, which really seems to be an overarching topic with many characters in the show. I mean, it makes sense and it's really relatable. Many people often look at life and harken back to the past and ponder on how they could have done things different, how they could have done things better. Some are dealt a bad hand despite legitimately trying their hardest, and some don't try hard enough and come to regret it later in life. All of us hope for a greater future. Most of us want to achieve something in life, and we all want to be happy. With the way things are going and where Diane's mind is currently at, I foresee Sebastian St. Clair in her near future. Will that be enough though to quench that persisting thirst for fulfillment? Let's go find out what Todd's goofy self has been up to throughout the episode before getting back to BoJack. Since BoJack had changed his couch at the beginning of his journey of becoming a better version of himself, we learned that Todd had grown attached to his old couch, as it had been his bed for a very long time, so there was definitely some emotional attachment there. And for whatever reason it may be, he doesn't seem to trust the new couch that BoJack bought. So he decides to sleep everywhere else but the couch, like in BoJack's car and trailer, until he later convinces himself to overcome his illogical fear of the new couch and go and sleep on it. Said self-motivation had initially started with Todd trying to motivate BoJack, and that was after BoJack had returned to his usual hostile demeanor towards Mr. Peanut Butter in his trailer. Yep, it really seems like we're getting the old BoJack back. Didn't last very long, did it? Hey, let's see, maybe the new positive BoJack will come back again. Later on, we begin to see Rutabaker's slyness and inauthenticity that he disguises with enthusiasm. Well, that's the impression I got after learning that he ruined Princess Caroline's chance on a movie that she put together for her client, information that she had told him in good faith. Is it obvious that I don't like this guy? It is, isn't it? Well, I don't think this friendship's going to last very long anyways. Keep watching and we'll find out. Returning back to BoJack, he receives a horrible and saddening call from his mother, who informs him that she had read the things about her that were mentioned in BoJack's book. For possibly the first time ever, to my surprise and to BoJack's as well, she says, "I'm sorry," but she doesn't directly say sorry for her role in creating the broken man that BoJack has become. She instead says sorry because she believes BoJack will never be happy and that it's a curse. The atmosphere becomes unsettling with the entrance of piano notes played sharply and abruptly in the background as Beatrice unveils her rancid reality, a curse that she insists will always be with BoJack, condemned to be lonely, miserable, and empty for the rest of his days. She calls it a birthright. What an absolutely twisted mind. She helped create this miserable existence of desolateness for him that she now blames on a family curse, not even being able to take a minute amount of accountability. After that phone call had ended with his mother, BoJack was called to return on set. The scene transitions to BoJack sat on a bench and the spotlights are on him. With the feeling of the heart-wrenching call still ringing in his ears, BoJack channels that pain into his performance. Finally, he was able to complete the scene he was struggling so much with. And just like that, the scene is captured and it's on to the next. BoJack remains stagnant within himself, a reflection of lost potential, shattered into hundreds of pieces, left to waste in perpetual misery. In episode 2, we come to learn one of the shortcomings and disadvantages of BoJack's rejuvenated career since the release of his biography, a book that explored who he was and the subtleties of BoJack, as well as the acute and personal details about his past. Any slight semblance of privacy that BoJack had once known is now completely non-existent. Everybody knows so much about BoJack, and thus leading to some issues in his dating life. Women now only seem to be dating him because of the perception of BoJack that they've concocted in their head from reading his book. Imagine going on a first date with someone and they knew pretty much every single thing about you. I imagine it would make the experience feel a lot more one-sided, and the fun of the initial stage of dating, getting to know each other, would definitely not feel the same. Now, from the book, it's made clear that BoJack is not the best human being. Not even close. That he is incredibly toxic and riddled with baggage and trauma in more ways than one. Now, one can assess with that knowledge that BoJack probably wouldn't be the best partner and would most definitely provide a relationship consisting of perpetual toxicity and instability. So, what type of woman do you think would read BoJack's book and think to themselves, wow, you know what? That sounds like someone I'd love to date. Yes, probably not a woman looking for a healthy relationship that will foster happiness and growth. No, the women that it attracts are women riddled with red flags themselves and that are hungry for a painfully unstable person like BoJack.
Hey, this table's a little wobbly. You want to yell at the waiter and make a scene?
No, I don't need...
Come on, do that BoJack thing where you make a big deal over nothing and everyone laughs at you, but also at the same time we relate because you're saying all the things polite society won't.
The book even made Todd famous. However, probably not for the reasons Todd would like.
Oh my God, are you Todd?
Yes.
Shut up, Todd!
Aww.
BoJack is informed that Todd, over the past 5 years, has been working on building his own Disneyland, an endeavor that he pursued after believing BoJack's lies that Disney World did not exist. Todd, my friend, you are funny, you are adorable, and you are sweet. But you are also not the brightest person, but at least you try your best. He had told BoJack of this 5-year-long project on numerous occasions during the length of its construction. But of course, BoJack, being the lackluster friend that he is, somehow didn't listen at least one single time out of the many times it was mentioned by Todd. Does BoJack really view Todd as a friend? Whilst we've come to understand that he lets Todd live with him to not be alone, is that all he sees Todd as? Escapism from his own mind? Company in his misery? We join Mr. Peanut Butter at the doctor's, ready to have his cone taken off. A cone that in episode 1 he wears to prevent himself chewing at his own arm, after injuring it by punching a mirror when he sees his own reflection and thinking it was another dog. I do like the real-life animal behaviours that they occasionally interject and sprinkle into the show. Makes for a good little chuckle here and there. We then get this funny moment which seems to be commentary on the American medical industry and its extortionate prices.
Well, that'll be $6,000. Good thing you're getting a free sandwich, huh?
Now, I've heard in America you get billed like $1,000 or something similar to that for being driven to the hospital in an ambulance. Is that actually the case? If you're American, please let me know down in the comment section. Now listen, if that is the case, and now I was in America and I ever broke my leg, I guess I'm just gonna have to walk it off. You'll have an easier time convincing me that pineapples are better on pizza than pepperoni than to convince me to pay such an amount for an ambulance. I may be totally wrong, so I apologize to Americans if I sound incredibly ignorant right now. Anyways, Diane is with Mr. Peanut Butter at the hospital, and during a conversation they have, we can see the beginnings of Diane's midlife crisis taking place after realizing that she'd been at a certain restaurant 80 times in a rather short time span. The realization seemed to make Diane contemplate deeply, and her fear of doing nothing worthwhile and falling into a repetitious routine in life creeps its way deeper into her mind. In BoJack's attempts to escape the burden of fame, we get a joke, which made me laugh. Predictable, but funny.
Ah, you vultures are killing me!
I'm sure he's talking about other vultures.
BoJack goes to the valley to try and escape recognition, but ends up meeting his old book publisher, whose life seems to be absolutely all over the place. I love this guy. He was a little gem of a character in the last season. It's at the valley that we are introduced to a new character called Wanda, who just came out of a 30-year coma and was immediately promoted to head of programming because she was the oldest in the company, and since everyone else above her was fired. Don't try to think too hard about it. No one said the show always made sense. Wanda's voice is very recognizable. I double checked to make sure and I was right. It's Lisa Kudrow, Phoebe from Friends. I was so stoked when I realized it was her. I absolutely adore Friends. And Phoebe was my second favorite character, just below Joey. Lisa Kudrow, like all the other voice actors in the show, does a fantastic job. BoJack, despite the fact that he absolutely adores talking about himself to no end, was pleasantly surprised and pleased by the fact that Wanda didn't know who he was. A moment in their interaction that I really appreciated and thought that it perfectly represents the importance of your outlook on life, as it determines the happiness you have within yourself.
Got a couple curly guys in here with the regulars. How hard is it to look before they bring it out? Excuse me, miss?
I know, isn't it cool? It's like we're getting away with something.
Wanda's positive outlook on things, juxtaposed by BoJack's pessimism, a true yin and yang of character. They both go back to BoJack's place and talk to each other for hours on end till sunrise. Without doing the deed, yes, you heard me right, without getting frisky. BoJack invited a woman back to his place and they did not immediately have sexual intercourse. Wow. I know, shocking. He must really like her personality, because that's definitely not a BoJack thing to do. They do still decide to sleep together as the sun rises, and they both appear very much compatible. BoJack is able to see her for who she is, and not only a goal to be scored in bed. BoJack doesn't want her to leave. Eager to spend more time with her, he takes her to Todd's Disneyland, which, by the way, probably doesn't meet a single safety regulation. Good gosh, Todd. BoJack wants to spend more time with Wanda. These are not feelings that he gets regularly. Normally with BoJack, once sex has been had, he isn't interested in getting to know the woman further. To him, the goal had been scored, and he'd feel no need to put in any more effort. But with Wanda, it's different. Taking a trip to Disney World, Princess Carolyn is there with Vincent. Now, I'll be honest, I don't really care for their storyline at this point. It's very predictable and I find very little humor in it. I simply just don't find it very interesting. I do adore Princess Carolyn as a character. While she is plenty toxic and messed up in her own way, like pretty much all other characters in this show, examples that we'll uncover a lot more of as the seasons go by, I simply just adore the portrayal of her character and the intricacies in her delivery of lines during somber and heartfelt moments, and I just love how charismatic and charming she is. But I do really wish they gave her more interesting and engaging storylines, particularly in the first half of this season. We get to feast our eyes on the horror show that is Todd's Disneyland. Oh boy, is he gonna get sued into oblivion. Blimey, those are just injuries waiting to happen. We're confronted with what seems to be a less likable and more manipulative side of Mr. Peanut Butter in this scene. He wants to be part of Todd's Disneyland despite Todd doing all the work to make it what it is, even though it's not really much if we're being honest. And the fact that this was a business venture that he wanted to tackle on his own. But oh no, Mr. Peanut Butter was not having that at all, and he essentially threatens Todd. How could you, Mr. Peanut Butter? It's not long until BoJack and Wanda make their relationship official. Wanda visits him on set and he's practically glowing. Diane is there to witness it in all its glory and almost seems jealous of this display of affection between them. Strange. After Diane makes a slight comment on Wanda's mental immaturity, Kelsey proceeds to tell her how famous people are usually stunted in growth because most celebrities never feel the need to grow and evolve and seek self-improvement. An age of stagnation. Not only celebs though. She says for most people it's when they get married, for instance, and settle into a routine. She makes certain valid points. Most people in general, I think, don't make it their goal to continuously seek to evolve and learn new things, whether that's things about themselves, the world, or finding new hobbies, or just finding ways to keep the brain stimulated, growing and productive, making efforts and strides in becoming a person who is happy within themselves but still hungers for growth. We as humans often fall into routines, and routines aren't necessarily bad at all, but oftentimes comfortability in those routines may lead us to never challenge our own beliefs, to make forward strides in elevating our bodies, minds and soul. Growth is not a destination, it's a journey, one that doesn't need an ending. It's easy to imagine that being in the lap of stardom and riches, that you'd be more susceptible to the mindset of not needing to grow anymore. Now, of course, hearing something like this only adds fuel to the fire that is Diane's fear of stagnation, of falling into a routine and never being able to escape. In some ways, her and BoJack are very much alike. BoJack later takes Wanda to an 80s restaurant, which is 50s themed. He gushes to her about how much of an amazing time he's had with her. And just as he's saying this, coincidentally, there just happens to be a man sitting behind Wanda who had also been in a 30-year coma. What are the bloody chances, eh? Makes you think that 30-year comas are damn near a common thing in this universe. Wanda and this random man begin to conversate and get along immediately. They've got a connection due to their shared experience. BoJack does not like the look of this, not at all, and jealousy begins to set in. BoJack doesn't trust this guy at all, which is understandable. He could have been completely lying after all. But BoJack decides to go one step further by spying on the man, whose name is Alex. One could understandably presume that this was simply BoJack being self-destructive and letting his jealousy take control, which was definitely what he was doing. However, it is through this self-destructive act that he discovers Alex's true identity. He's a bloody KGB terrorist. Well, that took a completely left turn. Let's head back and see what Mr. Peanut Butter's been up to. Mr. Peanut Butter almost gets Todd's Disneyland closed after trying to make sure that what Todd was doing was completely legal, given that he'd forced his name onto being associated with it, and as you might have guessed, what Todd was doing was illegal as shit. After an intense, grueling court battle, comparable to the likes of Godzilla fighting Goku, not really, Todd's theme park is saved by a spelling error with the name that Disney had copyrighted. Todd narrowly escapes the clutches of defeat, and his Disneyland is allowed to remain. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not too sure. Todd is furious with Mr. Peanut Butter, mainly because he forcefully tried to put his name on something that Todd had worked really hard on for many years, despite not having contributed anything towards its creation, and the fact that he almost caused the place to be closed down due to the lawsuit Todd just managed to beat. It's safe to say their friendship is on rocky grounds at the moment. BoJack decides to host a party to celebrate Todd beating the lawsuit, but in reality it was just an excuse for him to expose Alex in front of a large crowd, which completely backfires on him. Somehow they all side with Alex, despite him admitting to being a literal terrorist.
I was a deep-cover KGB operative before I went into my coma. I've been trying to contact my handler back in Mother Russia, but I can't reach him, and I don't know if I ever will.
It's like he's got some sort of spell on them. This situation drives an even deeper wedge between BoJack and Wanda, but after a little pep talk from Princess Carolyn, he decides to try and win Wanda back, however misguided his tactic may be. By the way, I've said this before and I'll say it again, Princess Carolyn is way too good of a friend to BoJack, and I really don't think he understands just how lucky he is to have her as a friend. BoJack goes to Disneyland where he finds Wanda with Alex, who was stood chilling, roasting some marshmallows on a wooden bridge, inches away from an open fire. Yep, that doesn't at all look like a safety hazard. Just as BoJack was about to apologize to Wanda, Mr. Peanut Butter steals the moment and apologizes to Todd for his actions. It was then that Alex announces what his original plans were. He came to blow up Todd's Disneyland, but has now come to the conclusion that he doesn't need to take over capitalism, as capitalism sows seeds for its own destruction. And then he leaves. Bye, Alex, you odd son of a bitch. Shortly after, a fire breaks loose in Disneyland, to the absolute surprise of nobody. Mr. Peanut Butter saves Todd from imminent death, and both of them make up and are friends again. Despite the roaring fire in the background, BoJack attempts to apologize to Wanda. Wanda reveals that since she's getting older, she doesn't have time to wait for BoJack to figure his shit out. And with that said, BoJack makes a very spontaneous, uncalculated, and likely terrible decision by asking Wanda to move in with him. Is he truly ready for that next step? His face after the sudden realization of what he'd just done says no. Wanda agrees to move in with him, and we get some great visual imagery with the fiery backdrop burning everything to the ground. Likely how BoJack feels, a destroyer of anything he touches, or demonstrative of how this relationship is going to end. In flames. Who knows? Well, technically, I do. We start off episode 3 with a flashback to horsing around, the making of the pilot episode to be more specific. A time where BoJack's future must have seemed a lot brighter. This was a time where BoJack and Herb were still best friends. After the pilot was shot, Herb gives heartwarming words of encouragement and motivation to the cast and crew and tells them to take care of each other, and that no matter what happens, we're going to stick together. And at that moment, an entertainment family was forged. The scene quickly snaps back to the present moment, and we are at Herb's funeral. We find out that he died a horrific and totally unexpected death in a car that crashed into a truck full of peanuts, which he so happened to be allergic to, and that allergic reaction is what finally killed him. This had also been right after he had made a miraculous recovery with his cancer, which had gone into complete remission. Life all too often feels like one big, cruel joke. For so long, Herb would have gone on thinking that cancer would have been the thing that kills him, that was his fate, yet he goes out in a nonsensical, unimaginable way. It honestly perfectly illustrates just how unpredictable, unfair and convoluted life can be, and often is. What truly is the meaning of life? Do we truly have any control, or merely accept an illusion of control? Why is life so unfair? Who knows, my friend? Who knows? BoJack bumps into Charlotte at the funeral, an unexpected face, someone he'd not seen for 30 years. She tells BoJack to contact her if he's ever in New Mexico, her current place of residence, and thus the seed is planted for a particular episode. If you know, you know. But that's an episode we'll worry about in the latter half of the season. Let's move on for now. BoJack's guilt during the funeral is apparent, guilt he has to live with due to his many past mistakes that can't be put right, and the way in which his friendship with Herb came to an end, the thing that at that moment was eating him alive. Princess Carolyn is there, not for Herb though, to try and establish business connections. Now, despite really liking Princess Carolyn's character, no one in this show is perfect. In fact, no one in real life is perfect. Princess Carolyn, too, is at times a perfect example of the parasitic and vulture-like nature of the entertainment industry, at times so focused on financial gain and profit that she'll throw aside any morality in the pursuit of money and wealth, a trait that we've seen from her in the past, and one that will surely occur again in the future. Sherilyn, Joel and Brad, the family cast from Horsing Around who are also attending the funeral, gather round in Herb's bedroom and they catch up, each of them appearing to have their own stories and experiences since Horsing Around came to an end that have led them to a noticeably dissatisfied life, with Joel somehow taking on a whole new identity as an Englishwoman for some reason. Once again, this follows the theme I mentioned earlier, a lack of fulfillment and inner happiness within these characters. BoJack still refers to them as family, as if to say he's oblivious of the sizable passage of time, the lack of communication, and the fact that even when Horsing Around was still on air, they never actually behaved like a family. In a way, it somewhat gives you a look into BoJack's mind. It would make sense that BoJack has a skewed view of what a family truly is, given that his family definitely wasn't something to write home about. Sherilyn is handed a floppy disk drive from a very distinguished fellow, something that Herb had planned. Of course, BoJack had to interject himself into the situation and thought that Herb had surely left it for the rest of the crew too, as well as it perhaps leading to something that would make him feel better about himself for honouring a good friend's last wish, silencing the trumpets of guilt, even if only slightly. Henry Winkler, a close friend to Herb who is in charge of the funeral, is approached by Princess Carolyn, who, as mentioned before, is there to seek opportunities from Herb's death. Her initial attempts to talk business were immediately halted by Winkler, venting to her about how much he despises people who come to funerals to grift and saw it as a financial opportunity. Now, of course, this was exactly what Princess Carolyn was doing, so she clearly had to change her plan of action. She's then put into a situation where she makes up fallacies about hers and Herb's tight friendship. Mr. Peanut Butter makes the situation 100 times worse by constantly pressing her to tell more stories about their friendship. It almost seems as if he knew she was lying and was trying to expose her, just because of how extensive and probing the questions were, and the tone in which he asked her at times.
Please, tell us another story, but with even more details.
However, I'm sure that wasn't the case, and it's likely just Mr. Peanut Butter being far far too intrusive for absolutely no reason except for the sake of making the scene uncomfortable and funny. Princess Caroline's lies get deeper and deeper. Back to BoJack, we get another example of his obsession with himself and not being able to stand criticism and not being able to stand others being held in higher regards than him. It causes him jealousy to the point of envy.
Probably because I'm such a big fan. Horsing around was a goddamn riot. I especially love those kids. You know, wasn't so crazy about the horse.
Message deleted.
Todd enters the room the crew's all in, where they are making progress on finding out what is on the floppy disk, and Todd's eager to help out, but he's told to go away and given $10 to purchase some drinks for them from the vending machine. He goes off on his little side quest, where the simple act of purchasing drinks really doesn't go to plan. Before we talk more about Todd, we're taken back to another flashback from the past. Joelle is talking to Herb, and we're back in the days where Horsing Around was still on air. This was after Herb had been fired from Horsing Around, and the show had started a downward trajectory. Sarah wants to hang out with Joelle, likely searching for that sense of family and friendship that she rarely experiences with the life that was thrusted upon her at such a young age. She unfortunately doesn't have any friends her own age due to being homeschooled. She mentions that she has a stepdad who teaches her, and brings up the fact that he's also a photographer, a comment made out of the blue, and one that I did not bat an eye at when I first heard it. It was actually upon the third watch through of the show that I'd really started to put together the multiple comments that Sarah Lynn will make about her stepfather. I'll be honest, it starts to paint a rather disturbing image.
No, my mom's boyfriend homeschools me. He's a photographer.
Why can't you do this in Sarah Lynn's dressing room?
My stepdad's in there and he's being weird.
And it's something that can easily be missed if you aren't paying 100% attention to the show. As we all know by now, her mother was far from being a great representation of what motherhood should be. It's merely speculation on my end, as the show never outright talks about it and gives it more context. Todd bumps into a janitor after his attempts to buy some drinks failed, and he ends up losing the money that BoJack gave him. The janitor, seeing how visibly upset and fed up with himself Todd was, introduces him to the machine that transformed Steve Urkel. He tried to use it as a way to teach Todd a lesson about what the prop represents. But of course, Todd took it quite literally and actually believed that the machine was functional and could actually change him. He believed it so much that after he'd entered the machine, long gone was the dweeby, ill-prepared and unsmooth version of him. A new man was created. The man Todd always wanted to be. Composed, confident and cool. I introduce you to Toad Chavet. Through pure self-delusion and a massive dose of placebo effect, Todd was a new man. BoJack and the others finally managed to progress on their mission to find out what Herb had possibly left for them, after Joelle had her completely unrelated flashback and managed to remember the password needed to get into Herb's computer. They go to the location where Herb had hidden what he wanted Sarah Lynn to find. During Sarah Lynn's calm down after they had reached their destination, a storage unit, Sarah Lynn begins to remember a conversation that she'd had with Herb not long before he died. This was all completely coming to her because the drugs that she'd been on the entire funeral were beginning to wear off. I see she's still got a heavy drug problem. Do you reckon she'll ever get the help she needs? That she'll ever get better? And if you're watching this video, you've probably already watched the show, but I'm sure there are some people watching this who have never watched the show, in the same way that I sometimes watch video essays on games, for instance, that I'm yet to play or have no actual intention of ever playing. I'd like to know your perspective and prediction of where you think the story is going to go with Sarah Lynn. After she'd come more to her senses, she realised that Herb wanted her to find a copy of a book he wrote, so that she could publish it before he passed away. Herb was the least selfish of the group. He didn't just care about himself, and that's been proven through his words and through his actions. During the time of Horsing Around, he actually really seemed to care about the entire cast, and is probably one of the only characters that treats Sarah Lynn with any respect. It's a real shame that he died that way. Sarah Lynn makes another possibly disturbing comment after tasting a clump of hair that she found on the floor at the location where Herb's manuscript was meant to be but is missing from. She was able to immediately identify it as bear fur. Now, that information is made slightly disturbing when discovering that her stepfather is a bear. It's comments like this and the comment where she just randomly said her father was a photographer that really make me question what happened between her and her stepfather. In what situation would she have possibly had her father's fur in her mouth? Really makes you wonder. For Sarah Lynn's sake, I hope that what I'm thinking happened is not the case. But if I'm keeping it real, I don't think these are just random comments the writers decided to put in the show. There was clearly some intention by the writers. After the group discovered that the manuscript was missing from its supposed location, they came to the conclusion that it must have been stolen by Winkler, and Herb's bare assistant must have been part of it too, all for financial profit. They'd even considered that perhaps Winkler was actually the cause of Herb's death. However, the theory is short-lived after Winkler was confronted about the manuscript. He comes clean and states that he had absolutely nothing to do with Herb's death, but he did steal the manuscript, although it wasn't for the purpose of financial gain, but instead to save Herb from tarnishing his own legacy by releasing an apparently terribly written book. BoJack wanted to fix something. He was desperate to fix something that would help minimize the vast amount of guilt harbored in his heart. To feel like, even though he did wrong by Herb when he was still alive, he could at least do right by him in death. An urge, honestly not fueled by selflessness and simply wanted to do right by an old friend, but one to simply dull the sombering blades of regret. Toad Chavez meets up with BoJack and hands him the drinks he was sent on a mission to retrieve. It simply takes one insult from BoJack to completely shatter Todd's newly found confidence. It's perhaps symbolic of what happens to those around BoJack's life. Before you know it, all sense of optimism, positivity and self-belief starts to slowly trickle away, like water dripping from a leaky faucet. You realise that your life would have probably been much happier had you never met BoJack. BoJack has a fear of the unknown, as do most, to be honest. He is unsettled by what is yet to happen, and is demoralized when thinking of the future. The truth is, I think what BoJack is really scared of is himself. And just like the saying goes, misery does indeed love company. So we finally reach episode 4. We start episode 4 finding out it's Diane's birthday. Mr. Peanut Butter made a day that she'd absolutely love, and it was very well curated to her personality. But of course, still being the over-the-top and unaware golden retriever that he is, after the initial activities that he planned for the two of them, he decided to throw an additional house party on top of that, which he should be aware and has been told that it is not the type of thing Diane likes. Like I said in my season 1 breakdown, it often comes across that Mr. Peanut Butter just doesn't understand Diane as a person, or simply just refuses to try and understand Diane, and uses ignorance as an excuse. I believe he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's smarter than he often leads on. He'd gotten it right all day up until that point, so he clearly knows what she likes. So why would Mr. Peanut Butter be doing such a thing, one may ask? Well, I believe he does it for praise and acclaim from his peers. I believe he does bold and outlandish things just to look good, and often masks it as selflessness. At times, he can be rather self-absorbed and cares more about how good whatever extravagant act will make him look, as opposed to how that act will make the person receiving it feel. Now, do I think he's an egotistical narcissist who only cares about how the outside world sees him? Of course not. Just like many other characters in the show, Mr. Peanut Butter is multi-dimensional and has multiple layers to him. He isn't just a good boy. You get it? Because he's a dog? Dog man? Anyways, my point is, he is far from being a soulless narcissist who doesn't care about anything or anyone except for how he is perceived in the world. We are yet to explore anything from Mr. Peanut Butter's past, but perhaps his desire to be seen as a good dog clouds his judgment, and like golden retrievers usually tend to do, gets overly excited when praised and leading him to go over the top when trying to do something nice for someone and losing sight of whether what he's doing is actually something the recipient of the gift or gesture would want. He does deeply care about what others think of him, to what I'd say is a very unhealthy extent. But like I said, he is a complicated character, and even he has his fair share of toxic and unhealthy traits, as do most. During the party Mr. Peanut Butter organised for Diana, an argument would soon erupt, something that seemed to be over something so minuscule, but would be the straw that broke the camel's back, as the phrase goes. leading to an outburst of anger by Diane and the commencing of a rather long and grueling argument. It all stemmed from a statement that Wanda said about a certain celebrity still being alive, and Diane disagreeing with that. The thing, however, that caused her to snap was the fact that Mr. Peanut Butter sided with Diane and suggested that they check on the internet. Diane took that as a personal attack and was hurt by the fact that her husband didn't immediately side with her. I will say though, that outburst is definitely not the behavior of someone who's in a good place mentally. But like I said, the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, was the response to that situation in any way appropriate? Of course not. It's crystal clear that such fierce outpour of anger and rage has to do with an accumulation of other unresolved issues within herself and her relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter. Following the argument, we then follow the consequent activities of BoJack and Wanda, as well as Todd and Princess Carolyn, who escape from Diane's now uncomfortable and ruined party. We first start off following Princess Carolyn, who is driving with Todd. Whilst driving in the car, she sees what appears to be her boyfriend Vincent. But this time around, Vincent wasn't wearing his atrocious disguise. No. Now, instead of realizing that BoJack was right this entire time that she'd been dating a bloody child, she instead comes to the conclusion that the child she saw must have been Vincent's son, and that he must have a secret family that he's hiding from her. I guess that would be an easier conclusion to make in her head than realizing and accepting that Vincent has been a kid this entire time. Vincent, if that's actually his real name, spots her in the car and attempts to maintain this lie that he'd gotten away with for so long. He later shows up at Diane's place without the disguise, and we come to learn that his real name is Kevin. But of course, he still maintains that him and Vincent are different people. Somehow it doesn't strike Princess Carolyn that Vincent's supposed child knew exactly where she lived. They really do make her look terribly stupid at times in this show, don't they? To be honest, the same can be said with all characters from this show. The show by nature can be incredibly ridiculous, and logic can sometimes be replaced with mindless oafishness for the sake of comedy, and that often lands in the show. Like I've said in the past, the script work is top tier and hardly disappoints, but there are a few instances where the comedy fails to hit the mark for me, or it's so out of character that it does a disservice to the character. But more than often, the tonality of the show swims smoothly between that of seriousness, the somber moments, the joyous moments, the moments of laughter, and the multifold of involute emotions and themes that this show has to offer. After Princess Carolyn questions Kevin on the whereabouts of his father, Kevin urgently requests to go to the bathroom, which of course he's able to find completely on his own. Come on, Princess Carolyn, you're smarter than this. The show established you as a smart character. How is the truth of this situation not blatantly obvious to you? Honestly, I think my main issue with this part of the episode is that I just don't find it funny or interesting at all. Did you? What follows is multiple excruciating and unenjoyable minutes of Vincent/Kevin desperately trying to fool Princess Carolyn that Kevin and Vincent are two separate beings and are in the room at the very same time, when in fact it's just Kevin sitting on what appears to be two other kids in a trench coat and occasionally coming out of the disguise while she's not looking and hiding the upper quarter of the now headless disguise with a newspaper. I've already made my feelings clear. I don't like it. I don't like this storyline. I know I'm not alone in this. I find this uncomfortable and an absolute wasted opportunity for Princess Carolyn's character. Absolutely wasted. I just sound like a massive Vincent hater, don't I? Well, fuck it, I guess I am a Vincent hater. I hate it all. After all these shenanigans, she finally decides to break up with Vincent. Will this be the end of their love story? Let's bloody hope so. In some ways, Vincent could be a metaphor for something more. Perhaps that's what I've been missing. I've been missing the core message behind Vincent. A while back, I can't remember when exactly, I read a Reddit post stating that he could have been symbolic of how BoJack viewed him in his head and wasn't actually representative of what Vincent actually looked like. But that theory really only holds merit when only looking at Season 1, but loses any weight once considering the events in Season 2. One could say that the way Vincent is portrayed is perhaps emblematic of Princess Carolyn's insistence of sticking by emotionally immature and childish men, in the same way that she stuck by BoJack despite the blatant character flaws and gigantic red flags, the childishness and immaturity, and him always taking advantage of her, which is then represented visually via Vincent. Maybe Vincent is real. Who knows? Let's be honest, it's 3 kids in a bloody trench coat. In reality, I believe it was just a silly little gag that overstayed its welcome. The episode continues as we join the journey of BoJack and Wanda after they too leave Diane's party. We're situated in BoJack's car as they journey back home after the hectic evening. Witnessing the chaos within Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter's relationship stirred up the insecurities, fears and uncertainties BoJack had felt about his relationship with Wanda and the fact that they'd already moved in together, a move that BoJack clearly never wanted from the beginning, a request made to subdue any chance of what he would have considered abandonment. It was a rash and careless decision to cling onto the little happiness that Wanda was able to momentarily fill the void in his heart with. Now that the dust had settled, BoJack remembers the difficulties of being in a relationship and how complicated living with a partner can get. What does he do? He starts self-sabotaging. Things were becoming more unclear by the minute, like a bathroom mirror progressively getting foggier from the steam of a hot shower. Whilst driving, BoJack accidentally hits a deer, who he probably would have left for dead had it not been for Wanda's voice of reason and empathy. Not doing a very good job at becoming a better person there, BoJack. Once they found the deer that had run into the woods, BoJack offers to pay for the deer's medical bill. Since the deer had already been hit so many times, his insurance would no longer cover him if he went to the hospital again. It's a pretty smart joke actually, when you realise that deers are the highest cause of animal-related car accidents in the US by a large margin. So it makes sense that the deer is in arrears. I think that rhymed. Deers in arrears. Anyways, they take him to the hospital and Wanda tells BoJack a continuation of a joke that she had started in the car, and one that had simply puzzled BoJack. But once BoJack had heard the full thing, he was able to find the humor in it. Wanda closes off the scene by saying this.
Wow, that is actually a really good joke.
I told you, some things take time.
Towards the end of the episode, we are joined with Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane right after everyone had left the party, and we witness firsthand the turmoil surrounding this relationship, both of them exhibiting toxic behaviors in their own way. Whilst the rage-filled argument persists, Diane cleans up the house in a fit of anger. Mr. Peanut Butter is told by Diane that she never wanted a large party and that she believed he only did it for himself, given that he should be more aware of the type of person that Diane is. Now, instead of maturely digesting the information and analysing his actions in the situation, trying to de-escalate the situation, he resorts to using rather manipulative language that ignores/completely disregards Diane's emotions and viewpoint in the moment.
What a monster! Throwing you a party like some sort of terrorist! Because it's a well-known fact that if you really hate someone, really want to hit them where it hurts, you throw them a party!
Emotions are high and neither of them are considerate of the other person's point of view. They were both toxic in this situation. Diane was letting her piled up emotions out in an awfully unhealthy way, breaking plate, shouting at the top of her lungs. Yes, Mr. Peanut Butter can sometimes act careless and thoughtless, but that does not in any way excuse her behaviour, which realistically stems from her own inner struggles. She fails to see all the good things that she has going in her life and thinks that it's a lack of adventure or a bigger purpose that is causing her to feel a vacant sense of self, without realising that the emotions within her, like a cave created by the rough seas of her past traumas, may not go away by flying away with Sebastian St. Clair. It may be a momentary distraction, but I think her sorrows go deeper than her need for adventure and a more unpredictable life. The argument settles down for a while and continues later on upon Diane getting annoyed once again at what Mr. Peanut Butter was saying, unfairly villainizing him. Her husband secretly doesn't want her to go away to a war-torn country where she could bloody die. Can you really blame him? He wasn't trying to force her to not go, and she's simply not being considerate of her husband's point of view. She's only taking it in from her perspective. It's perfectly understandable that he wouldn't want her to go, but ultimately it's her decision to make, and I'm sure he understands that. But he fears the uncertainty of what will happen if she does go, and his worries and emotions are valid and should be respectfully acknowledged. They are married after all. They're meant to be a team. Mr. Peanut Butter does indeed have flaws, but there's no doubt that he loves Diane. The episode comes to an end with an understanding between the two. They do love each other. But one thing you learn as you get older, a relationship requires more than just love to sustain itself. I absolutely love what the writers did with the latter half of this episode. At times, the moments felt so real and tense, and had me behaving as though I was at a friend's house, awkwardly sitting in a room, as the thunderous echoes of my friend and their partner arguing flooded my eardrums, and I am just sat down in the midst of such uneasy tension, eager to escape. Apart from the part with Princess Carolyn and Vincent, this episode was absolutely top-notch for me. Episode 5. In this episode we follow Todd and his personal search for self-worth and purpose in what can often feel like a meaningless existence. He finds what he believes to be his calling in taking care of a chicken that is destined for slaughter, but escaped its fate and has crossed paths with Todd. Elsewhere we observe BoJack as he makes his desperate attempts to get Kelsey's approval, as he hates it when people do not like him and is desperate for acceptance, yet eager to push anyone who actually cares about him away. A self-fulfilling prophecy of guaranteed loneliness. We also follow Diane, tasked with taking care of Kelsey's daughter, a task that she accepts, but there is obvious static between her and Kelsey's daughter. Diane in fact sees her younger self in her. She's called Irvin, by the way. She's rebellious, edgy, and perpetually uninterested, but Irvin doesn't seem to like Diane very much, being your typical angsty teen who's unnecessarily mean and feels like she's misunderstood by everyone. Feeling judged and belittled by Irvin, Diane, in attempts to prove to herself that she's still as rebellious and spontaneously exciting as her younger self, she carries out certain deeds that she wouldn't normally do had it not been for Irvin being there. Before we dive more into Diane's storyline and how she crosses paths with BoJack, Todd and Kelsey, let's firstly rewind back to the start of the episode. The show sets up the episode by showing us an advert for cooked chicken sold by Gentle Farms. By the way, this guy gives me the heebie-jeebies. Now look, I am no vegan and I occasionally do find myself gobbling down 10 pieces of KFC fried chicken whilst looking at myself in utter disgust as I gaze at my now protruding belly, a single crumb away from bowel explosion, and avoiding any form of eye contact with my nearby gym, sprawled out on my sofa like an overweight lazy cat. But this episode really made me feel some type of way about eating chicken. Maybe I'll go vegan, who knows? First thing you have to realize is that in this world, animals and humans live as equals. This is a world where animals are just as intelligent as humans, where they talk and walk and have damn near the same skeletal structure as humans. They're humanoid animal creature things. For goodness sake, the damn guy selling the chickens is a chicken himself who markets his product as free-range chickens and is rival to Chicken for Days, a competitor with a reputation for not treating its chickens as well through life. Let's head back to the fact that the farmer selling the chickens for consumption is also a chicken. Isn't that like cannibalism or something? They don't even attempt to physically differentiate the chickens meant for consumption and the ones that aren't. Both are very much humanoid. The thing that does differentiate them is intelligence. Once born, the chickens that are picked for consumptions are injected with a whole bunch of hormones that make them develop some sort of neurological issue, making them as unintelligent as real-world chickens. Robbed of their lives, now destined to be locked away in a farm and eventually served hot for a paying customer. That's more or less the same as a human being having a restaurant that served up humans that were mentally challenged. Somebody call 911. Anyways, we witness an accident caused by BoJack, who's not paying attention to the road, of course. The accident then leads to one of the chickens, who Todd later names Becca, escaping out of the moving truck that was likely taking her to her death. Close call. In the very beginning of the episode, where we are introduced to the rivaling chicken companies, Chicken for Days and Gentle Chickens, I can appreciate the subtleties, or not so subtle, message behind the scene. Or should I say the hidden question that notions to the viewer to ponder to themselves, a question that I've heard before from vegans who are passionate about their beliefs. Does the act of making an animal's life not completely miserable justify or lessen the horrors of its slaughter? As I mentioned before, I'm not a vegan, and I've always loved meat in my mouth. Pause. But I can appreciate the questions that were stirred up within me by this show. How it was written, paced, and the comedy behind it, whilst having a nugget of self-analysis for me as the viewer. Todd, unsure of what to do with himself and without purpose, winds up meeting the escaped chicken, and like I mentioned earlier, who he names Becca, who is now being investigated and chased down by the police. Becca is a wanted chicken, and Todd believes that he found his purpose to protect Becca. He's later interrogated by Officer Fuzzyface, Meow Meow. Fuzzyface. I love this character. Officer Fuzzyface is investigating the area in search of Becca, but Todd manages to expertly evade being caught assisting the chickens escape. We get this great scene.
Big reader, real nerd. Back off. Okay. I'm sorry, honey.
Hold on. If you're really a nerd, who's your favorite Baroque composer?
Diane, who is with Irvin, finds Todd with the chicken, and Todd proceeds to explain the entire situation to Diane, who informs Todd of the dangers of his escapades and urges him to stop doing what he's doing, or they'd be getting themselves potentially in a lot of trouble. That mindset was swiftly substituted for one of fearlessness, prowess, and desire to prove to herself and Irvin that she isn't some boring, uninteresting individual. Elsewhere, police officer Fuzzyface and the rest of the police are hard at work trying to solve the mystery of the missing chicken. Okay, these cops aren't very good at their job. Diane, Todd, and Irvin make it their mission to take Becca to Gentle Farms, where she would at least be able to live out a better life before death. It's rather evident that within this short time of knowing Becca, Todd has bonded with her, so saying goodbye was hard. I don't think he wanted to let his new friend go. BoJack is with Kelsey at this point, still making attempts to shift Kelsey's perception of him from a negative to a positive one. An endeavor that is further amplified when Kelsey hears the dangers that Diane has put Irvin in. BoJack uses this as his opportunity to be the hero, inching closer to her good graces. An aspiration that he can't seem to let go of. Truly desperate to be adored by all, yet the destroyer of any love that blossoms in the light of his own attempts. Back to Todd, Diane, and Irvin, they pedal back on their initial plan of leaving Becca at Gentle Farms, after Todd is left feeling unsettled and unsatisfied, with Becca still being in a place where she was destined to be killed. Todd feels like he has an obligation to Becca, and so leaving her at Gentle Farms, he felt like he let her down. Diane empathizes with Todd's inner turmoil, being able to relate to the things he said. They decide to return to Gentle Farms later at night, armed with the determination and will to do what they thought was right, which was to set Becca free, where she won't be someone's next order of chicken thighs and drumsticks with a side of coleslaw and fries and a large Pepsi Max chilled to perfection. Sorry, I was quite hungry when I wrote that. BoJack and Kelsey find themselves in a predicament. BoJack's car has broken down, and this of course does not bode well for either of them. Kelsey calls him out on his relentless need to talk about himself in any given situation. We then learn a core motivation behind Kelsey's character and why this particular directing role is really important to her. She wants to be able to provide a better life for Irvin. She wants to be a good mother and fears for the life where her daughter is not excelling. She believes this is her only shot at a big-time directing role that could put her in the financial position she aims for to give her daughter that life. The current hijinks that her daughter is involved in could also lead to Kelsey losing custody of Irvin. She doesn't know what to do and questions herself on if she's a terrible mother. And for the first time in the entire episode, I think, BoJack says something that was not just an attempt to get Kelsey to like him. He was actually genuine and for a moment being authentic. Shortly after, they are saved by a man in a pickup truck who recognizes them and offers them a ride in exchange for a signature from both of them. In their attempts to quickly sneak out of Gentle Farm, Todd, being the klutz that he is, causes a domino of events which wakes up the farmer and his family. This dude is a scary man. Someone check on his wife and kids. They definitely don't look like they want to be there. Diane and Todd go to the barn, whilst Irvin heads back to the car for safety. The moment is intense as Diane and Todd scurry away, making sure to stay out of sight of the farmer, who's now wielding a shotgun. They wind up freeing all the chickens in the chicken house and grab Becca to personally get her to safety. While they hid, Diane and Todd have a heartfelt, wholesome conversation, and Todd lifts her spirits and tells her the positives that he sees in her, positives that I don't think she sees in herself. Unsure of where to go and there being seemingly no escape for them, they remain in place contemplating their next move. All of a sudden the barn doors burst open, but it's not the farmer, it's his wife, who begs to be taken with them. Blimey. I felt really bad for her. This was not the life she wanted. Out of nowhere, Irvin heroically burst through the wall with the car to save the day. Unfortunately, the farmer's wife was left behind. Their mission was a success until it wasn't. They were stopped by the police in the middle of the road and taken to jail. But luckily, BoJack and Kelsey arrive, and BoJack is able to save the day because, you know, he's famous. And the police were like, I bet, you're free to go. Of course, this just strokes BoJack's ego, but they are pretty lucky BoJack was there. BoJack also managed to find a home where Becca could live out the rest of her life, without having to worry about becoming a meal, with Drew Barrymore of all people. Basically, all the work that they did would have meant pretty much nothing if it wasn't for BoJack saving the day, and Irving brings that up, while the 5 of them are in a car eating burritos. She wasn't sure if they'd actually made a difference, if they'd actually done anything worthwhile. But Diane felt like they had. Even though it may have only been a minute difference, it was a difference nonetheless. And as they drive, they pass by a Chicken for Days restaurant, as the sign is being updated from 5 billion served to 6 billion served. It brings to mind the feeling of no matter how much you strive towards certain things in life, sometimes you just don't feel like you'll ever be enough. Okay, we're almost at the halfway point of this season as we start episode 6. Mr. Peanut Butter and Todd are together, throwing out ideas for potential business plans. Terrible business plans, I should clarify. Only God knows how these guys aren't in jail already. Today's business idea was a bagel catcher. Can you imagine? For the many times you struggle to catch a bagel that's been hurled like a projectile towards your face. It's also literally a baseball mitt. Yeah. In their attempts to share this groundbreaking idea to their accountant, it's apparent that the accountant is there for another reason. In fact, he's utterly and completely fed up with the monstrous lack of brain cells in the room, as he tries to inform the both of them that the company PB Living is going under. Take a gander as to why. I'll wait. Ding ding ding, you got it right. Through their numerous business endeavors, they have wasted money like it grows on bloody trees. Like paying 50 grand to a bunch of kindergarteners for the right to the game tag. I'm dead serious. Honestly, I'm just surprised that it's taken this long for bankruptcy to occur. Mr. Peanut Butter must have been an absolute baller. Well, you know, not anymore. Low blow. Okay, my bad. My bad, Mr. Peanut Butter. The accountant informs Mr. Peanut Butter of the severity of this situation, telling him that he'll need to find a job to stay afloat. I will say Mr. Peanut Butter's optimistic outlook towards this situation is rather admirable. Instead of panicking, he's looking at the bright side of this situation, even if there really isn't any. His optimism is so extreme that it's genuinely puzzling. So, out he goes, a man on a mission to find work so that he doesn't end up on the bloody streets. He heads to Ronnie's office. Ronnie is his agent, anticipating good news about prospective job opportunities. This, by the way, is an agent that he's not spoken to in literal years. So let's just say his hopefulness may be a tad bit misplaced. After waiting what seemed to be an entire workday in the waiting room, he finally decides to head to his office and see if he's actually in. And well, let's just say what he finds was most definitely unanticipated. He walks into Ronnie's office to lock eyes with what is a lifeless body hung by a belt, with his trousers down and what seemed to be a pornographic magazine situated on his table right in front of him. Yeah, this seems like a real messed up case of erotic asphyxiation gone terribly wrong. I mean, can it ever really go right? Am I right? This is a kink I don't think I'll ever be able to understand. It takes Mr. Peanut Butter a moment to catch on to what he's actually looking at, but eventually he does, and oh blimey, I feel sorry for him. I don't think that's something I'd be able to get out of my head if I ever saw something so outrageously dreadful. Mr. Peanut Butter, however, seems like he's doing just fine. Man, he sure does have a formidable mind. In the next scene, the presenters of Morning Time Hollywood, essentially a drama/tea-spilling show, report on the death of Ronnie, and my goodness, is it disturbing how lightheartedly and comically the hosts treat this news. Yeah, the way he went out was pretty mad, but crikey, do they have no respect for the loss of life? To laugh at it is just such a feeble act. But such behaviour is indicative to how cold and unempathetic people can be towards one another, especially in the entertainment industry, where there are those that only view and use the death of other celebrities as means for financial gain, and think financial power is the only indication to the worth of a person as an individual. It's such a wicked world we live in, my friends. Such a wicked world. This plays in the background at BoJack's house as BoJack prepares to leave. The presenters briefly mention the fact that there's a new food truck. Despite hearing the insane news about how Ronnie died, BoJack instead talks about the food truck, asking Wanda if she'd like to go. You know, it kind of made me think about how we as people are now so desensitized to the craziness of the world, and we are also so overstimulated and probably have the shortest attention spans than any other point in history. You could literally have someone scrolling on YouTube Shorts and they see something absolutely horrific and just downright depressing, and then they scroll to the next short and it's an adorable chinchilla, and the previous short they'd just seen is almost completely forgotten about. It appears people are just acclimated to just how fucked up the world is. We see it on TV every single day, and sometimes when we hear something that should be shocking, we aren't even surprised. I'm personally trying to reduce the amount in which I watch stuff like YouTube, TikTok, all those things, and read a bit more as well so I don't completely rot my brain. I'd rather not one day wake up and have the equivalent attention span to a bloody goldfish. Things between BoJack and Wanda, perhaps to your surprise, seem to be going pretty well. BoJack even gets Wanda a pager so she can page BoJack whenever she wants. They seem really sweet together. They make plans to go to the new food truck together later that day, and just as BoJack was about to leave, "Love ya" slips out of his mouth. Silence. Wanda freezes. Even Todd is unsure of what just happened. The silence is loud and BoJack doesn't know what to do. He really just said the L word. Maybe he could take it back. Well, he certainly tries to anyways, quickly reclaiming the I love you as he proceeds to run through the front door filled with embarrassment. He was outside now, but he realized that he'd left his car keys inside. There was no way he was about to go back inside that house where Wanda was. After that terrible display from him, he decides the best course of action surely must be to literally steal a baby's crib and ride it to work. BoJack, BoJack, BoJack. I have no words for you. Diane, who is now aware of Mr. Peanut Butter's rather dire circumstances, shows worry about what it could mean for their future and urges Mr. Peanut Butter to search for a job. But it seems Mr. Peanut Butter sees no urgency in the situation, simply telling her that he's just gonna do what he did to land himself his own TV show oh so many years ago. Simply go with the flow, essentially waiting for a big opportunity to introduce itself to him, instead of chasing after it. He steps out into the world just going for a walk with nothing but positivity in his mind and anticipation for destiny to reveal a big opportunity for him. It seems that destiny might have actually heard him, because a poster that was calling for people to audition for a big acting role, that also happened to say preferably a 90s star as well, kept flying its way to him, and as it would hit him, he'd repeatedly push it away without taking a look at what was on the poster. But he's Mr. Peanut Butter. He's one lucky bastard. I'm sure things will be alright for him. He finds himself stood in front of a lady footlocker and believes perhaps this is his new calling. He walks in full of glee, ready to ask for a job. A character who definitely isn't as joyous as Mr. Peanut Butter this very day is Princess Carolyn, who has been having a rather dreadful day. Earlier in the episode on her way to work, she'd made a pretty bad start to her day. She broke her shoe, her clothes were stained, armpits sweaty, and mood down in the dumps. She was fed up of so many things, but particularly the lack of respect she receives where she works. But Rutabaga is there and cheers her up. He also makes a comment hinting towards possible marital issues, and that won't be the last time we'll hear about that topic. Princess Carolyn tries to explain to her boss why she was late, but her boss isn't having any of her excuses. He tells her about the death of Ronnie and that the other agents had already commenced in trying to get Ronnie's clients to join the Vigor roster, because a Vigor agent is a vigorous agent. Princess Carolyn is eager to join and help recruit celebs, but it turns out that she's far too late. All of Ronnie's clients, bar one, have already been taken off the table. Wanna guess who the remaining client is? Yes, you guessed it right. Mr. Peanut Butter. Ever since BoJack left the house, let's just say he's been distracted, unsure of how bad what he said came across and scared to return to his house later that day to face Wanda and discuss what had happened. He asks Diane for insight on what she thought about the situation, whilst hiding the fact that he was referring to him and Wanda. However, Diane herself isn't really in the right state of mind to be giving sound advice, as she's too busy worrying about becoming homeless because of Mr. Peanut Butter's financial situation being very lackluster. She even starts stealing food from set. Dang, that's how you know things are bad. BoJack comes up with the great idea to stay away from Wanda as long as he can to avoid facing the awkwardness, and he plans to do this by simply making sure time on set is prolonged as much as possible by repeatedly messing up takes. All this just to avoid talking to Wanda. Come on, BoJack lad, grow up, mate. However, there is only so long they have in a day, so despite an absolutely unproductive day, Kelsey is forced to call it ropes for the day. Union rules. BoJack still isn't ready to see Wanda. He even ignored the pager that she sent him earlier in the day while talking to Diane. So he decides to go to the bar with his co-star, Corduroy. While at the bar together, both enjoying their refreshing alcoholic beverage, Corduroy tells BoJack about the difficult day he's been having after hearing about Ronnie's death. He too is into the extreme side of sexual kinks. He dwells on the fact that that could have been him. He can't stop thinking about it and contemplates on the fact that he believes he shouldn't even be alive. And oh boy, does he really start to go into a little too much detail about it. BoJack, who was just next to him, is visibly uncomfortable, keen to push the conversation a different direction. But once Corduroy changes the topic to religion, BoJack has a change of heart and becomes open to hearing more about the disturbing kinky shit. It's late at night and BoJack returns home. He makes sure that he's silent and tiptoes his way into bed, hoping that Wanda wouldn't wake up. But she does. Oh boy, is this awkward. Wanda tells BoJack it's okay that he doesn't love her, because she doesn't love him. Yikes. I know that definitely wasn't what BoJack was expecting her to say. You know damn well that that's not going to be leaving his mind anytime soon. In the next scene, we visit Morning Time Hollywood, where the Ryan Seacrest type interviews Hank Hippopoulos. Hippopoulos? Am I saying that right? Hippopoulos. Hippopoulos. Hippity. Hank Hippopoulos. To discuss his new show. Now you're probably wondering, who the fuck is Hank Hippopoulos? This is a character we'll be learning more about at another point. I'll inform you right now, he definitely don't seem like much of a good guy. That's for sure. I don't know what accent that was. I was trying something. I probably failed. I'm sorry. In the morning, BoJack and Wanda continue where they left off the night before, with Wanda telling him that she doesn't love him either. Now, this really hurt BoJack. Even though he said the exact same thing to her, I don't think he actually meant it. He clearly said it as a response to the initial awkwardness of the situation when he told her that he loved her. And you know, BoJack isn't exactly the best at conveying his emotions. In a healthy way anyways. Princess Carolyn is in a store looking for new shoes, and during her time there she spots Mr. Peanut Butter, who is being his very likable self, and everyone absolutely loves him. You can definitely tell he's going to get Employee of the Month. Later on, she makes her way to work and bumps into Ruta Baker, who actually tells her about a lead for one of Ronnie's clients. Someone that no one else knew about. Someone who was incredibly low-key. Beloved novelist J.D. Salinger. Someone so reclusive that he faked his own death. When asked why he's telling her this, he tells her that it's because he likes her. That was a pretty nice thing to do. Maybe you ain't too bad after all, Ruta Baker. Maybe my gut feeling about you was wrong. Or was it? We cut to BoJack, who is heading to his trailer to find Corduroy sitting inside with a box in his hands. It's his gosh darn choking kit. Blimey, he's an addict. In fear of not being able to resist the temptations of this deadly sensual desire, he asks BoJack to take his choking kit for him and keep it safe because he has a girlfriend who loves him and would be heartbroken to see Corduroy back at it again. Now BoJack somehow takes what was said and derives his own interpretation from it, seeing it as a way to get Wanda to confess that she actually does love him, because surely anyone that loves him wouldn't want him to do such a thing. BoJack takes the kit. As he does, he questions the need for even having a kit, given that pretty much anything could be used, like a belt. You shouldn't have said that, BoJack, because it seems like you've just given this man ideas. Later on in the episode, BoJack is laid back on the couch and Wanda returns home. He asks to talk to her and then proceeds to divulge his apparent desires for erotic asphyxiation. He tells her just how dangerous it is and that if she loved him, she probably wouldn't want him to do it. Of course, Wanda promptly catches on to what he's doing and tells him to go ahead with it. Wow, things really aren't going your way, are they? BoJack doubles down and decides to go all out, believing that surely she wouldn't let him go through with it. Todd is on the outside of this and it's affecting him too, making him act out. It's like seeing his parents going through a divorce. Think of the kids! Princess Carolyn had found the whereabouts of J.D. Salinger, who is initially uninterested in the thought of dipping his toes back into the spotlight, tired of the hate and negativity that he was surrounded with in his prior attempts to rejuvenate his career. But Princess Carolyn, using her gift of the gab, is able to convince him to be her client. Princess Carolyn, now joined by Mr. Salinger, pitched their idea to the head of programming, who is Wanda, remember. Mr. Salinger starts by spewing his ideas and Princess Carolyn is left looking gobsmacked, clearly not expecting this to be what he was going to say. His idea was to do a game show where the audience members would ask celebrities questions. Wanda, however, loves this idea and Princess Carolyn is left looking further gobsmacked. He calls it Stars and Celebrities, What Do They Know? Do they know things? Let's find out. That's a bloody brilliant name right there. Quite unique. Now the only thing left is, who's going to host the show? Just then a light bulb turns on in Princess Carolyn's mind. Mr. Peanut Butter. Of course, he'd be perfect. She goes to see him at Lady Footlocker, where he's surrounded with his loving audience of female shoppers who can't seem to get enough of him. She asks him if he's willing to host the game show, and he enthusiastically accepts the offer. Mr. Peanut Butter, you are one lucky son of a bitch. After having such a successful day, during a meeting with other agents and her boss, Princess Carolyn was expecting some sort of acknowledgement for what she'd accomplished, but no one cares. In fact, it's not even brought up. Do you want to know what was brought up in the meeting? Instead, this.
One agent did something that no one else could. I'll give you 2 hints. Catcher and rye.
Ah, nothing.
Charlie Witherspoon caught a rye bagel coming out of the toaster.
Come again?
It was coming fast and hot.
Maybe a bagel catcher isn't such a dumb idea after all. BoJack still continues to double down on his plans to proceed with choking himself out, still hoping that surely he'd be stopped. But even as a contraption is being built in his room and he is mere minutes away from going through with it, Wanda still refuses to tell him not to do it. Wanda asks to address the elephant in the room, while there's literally an elephant in the room. Very, very funny. Instead of just giving up on this ridiculous charade, he continues with his plans, inserts his neck into the rope, and is ready to pull the lever. This had to be the moment she would tell him to stop, surely. But no, even then she just walks out of the room. BoJack is shocked and attempts to chase after her, forgetting he had a bloody rope around his neck. He literally starts choking and Wanda runs back in and finally concedes and tells BoJack that she does love him. She then tells him that if he loves her, that he'll stop. He manages to escape the kink death trap, finally satisfied in knowing that she does love him. And while still not admitting that he loves her, but it couldn't be any more obvious that he does. And Wanda sees that too. In Princess Carolyn's office, it's late and she's talking to Rutabaga, venting her frustrations, wondering why she even tries, when her hard work and accomplishments are never recognized. Reminds me of certain jobs I've had in the past, doing so much for a company just to never have your hard work acknowledged or appreciated. Working in an environment where you don't feel respected, it can be soul-crushing. Rutabaga tries to lift her spirits by giving her what he calls the movie star speech. Princess Carolyn thanks him. There's a brief silence, and that silence is then broken up by Rutabaga telling Princess Carolyn about him and his wife getting a divorce. The episode then proceeds to end on a really dark and depressing note, as BoJack attempts to return Corduroy's kit, only to find him hung to the ceiling of his trailer with a piece of lime in his hands. He went too close to the sun, and he got burnt. We've reached episode 7, and oh boy, this episode is a bit of a doozy. We start off the episode with a flashback to the year 1994, and BoJack and Mr. Peanut Butter are nominated for the Animal Choice Awards alongside Hollywood royalty Hank Hippopopoulos. Hank came out on top that night, and through the flashback, it's established that he's a big deal. A really big deal. It was at this award show that Mr. Peanut Butter and BoJack meet for the very first time. BoJack has been a tremendous arsehole to Mr. Peanut Butter from the very first time they met. I guess he was particularly bitter for not winning the award this very night. Mr. Peanut Butter, on the other hand, was ecstatic and enthusiastic to even have his name uttered in the same sentence as Hippopopoulos. Calling him a big fan would be an understatement. Hank later walks up to BoJack and talks to him, telling him that he's seen Horsing around and that he finds him pretty funny, but that he was Uncle Hank and apparently you can't be Uncle Hanky. Sour words that begin to take on multiple meanings after watching this episode. We'll learn an awful lot more about this particular geezer as the episode goes on. And let's just say, I don't think he's the lovable old man he camouflages as. Sebastian St. Clair calls Diane, requesting that she brings him a big Toblerone bar upon her arrival at Cordovia, which she has planned to go to in a month's time. He does this in the midst of jumping out of a plane, moments away from literally crashing. You truly are a mad lad, Mr. Sebastian St. Clair. I'll give it to you. Diane tells him about the death of Corduroy and the fact that the production is now on hiatus, giving her, BoJack, and Princess Caroline the opportunity to go on a book tour to promote their new paperback edition of BoJack's biography, One Trick Pony. Eager to have Diane join him and document everything, and for a Toblerone bar of course, he pleads for her to get there as soon as possible. Princess Caroline warns BoJack to be careful about what he says, since he seems to have a knack for getting people mad about the things he says. But he assures her that there is nothing to worry about, while also demonstrating exactly what she's worried about. However, in this episode, BoJack is not the main focus. Oh no. It's Diane. In Alaska, where the book tour is taking place, Diane and BoJack are asked questions by a small crowd of people. All they need to do is keep it about the book and call it a day. Let's just say things really stray away from the intended plan. Firstly, let's talk about the absolutely heavy and unrelated questions that the people in the audience are asking.
BoJack, your book talked a lot about how much you love apple fritters.
Yeah, thanks for that, Diane.
So my question is, do you think Israel has a right to defend herself? And what part should the US play as an ally?
Blimey, is this what book tours are normally like? BoJack manages to successfully skate his way around the question, giving a response least likely to ruffle any feathers, a true politician's answer some may say. I don't think Princess Caroline thought he was even capable of it. Truly a linguistic wizard, aren't you, BoJack? But it's not over yet, lads and lasses. Diane is asked if she was ever worried that the book that she wrote on BoJack would hurt his career, and BoJack is eager to hear the answer to this. She says this:
I think the truth is worth pursuing, no matter what. BoJack's not perfect. There are plenty of other celebrities who have done much worse things, and it hasn't hurt their career.
A follow-up question is asked. Like who? The crowd ponders. She then proceeds to list off names and eventually gets to a particular name that seems to hit a nerve in the audience. Mr. Hank Hippopopoulos. Surely not Hanky. The crowd is shocked. Surely he is too kind to be capable of any evil, seems to be the consensus within the crowd. We learn exactly why Diane included him in this list. 8 separate women had made allegations about him. All were prior assistants. The audience was in shock when learning these allegations against Hollywood royalty. Next thing you know, the information about the allegation, which had already been public information before Diane even mentioned it, it's all resurfacing and it's making its rounds on the news, and there is outrage. Outrage at the fact that people would say such things about Hank. How dare they? And that surely it all had to be lies, right? Mr. Peanut Butter, who seems to be having the time of his life, is enthusiastic about his new gig as host of a game show. He'll even be working alongside Hank Hippopopoulos, which was a dream for him, a dream that has come true. He was kind of fanboying out when meeting Hank again after so many years. He hears of the drama being stirred up about Hippopotamus because of the allegations that Diane had brought to the surface again. And this worries Mr. Peanut Butter. Not only does Mr. Peanut Butter likely see Hank as innocent, simply because this is his idol and he probably wouldn't want to believe such a thing, but he's now also working with the man. Hippopotamus is the main thing keeping the network that employs Mr. Peanut Butter afloat. He asks her not to take this further, and she agrees with him. She too wishes that she'd never even brought it up, but of course that won't be the last time. Remember what she said earlier, the truth is worth pursuing, no matter what. Let's see how much she'll stick to those words. In their next book tour location, Diane becomes a woman on a mission to expose the truth on the man she was certain is not who he claims to be. But she wasn't just going after anyone, she'd be going after royalty, a beloved household name, and she'd have a hard time making her case in a world where money and power often speaks the loudest, dampening out any opposing voices. Everyone is against Diane, but she now has the drive and the resoluteness within herself, confident that getting the truth was the right thing to do. Despite any effect it could have on her life and the life of her husband, the truth was worth pursuing. But will she succeed? Next thing you know, Diane is on the news debating her point on the situation, angry at the fact that journalists refuse to even tell the viewers what exactly Hank Hippopopoulos is being accused of. We also get this line from the news anchor. BoJack tries to get in the middle of this, eager to get the attention focused on him again, not even really caring about what was actually going on, just annoyed with Diane for taking the spotlight. Wanda is in her office. She calls BoJack, confused about what Diane was doing and why she was doing it. Without Hank Hippopopoulos, Wanda's entire network would sink. She'd be out of a job, and so would Mr. Peanut Butter and many others. It's instances like this that really make you analyze the human psyche. I'd assume most people would say finding out the truth in this situation is the right thing to do. But how many of you would invert that answer if said truth puts your livelihood and the livelihood of your family in jeopardy? Just how important is the truth to you? Later on, Princess Carolyn introduces Diane to Amanda Hannity. Finally, someone who looks to be on Diane's side, ready to move with eagerness in uncovering the truth. BoJack is there, but not as encouragement, as a deterrent to what Diane wants to do. But Diane ain't listening. She wants to see this through, and Amanda will be the person to help her blow the lid off this situation and bring forth justice. At least that was the hope. Diane gets what she believes to be a lead from a current assistant of Hippopopoulos, who leaves a voicemail saying that she'd like to talk to someone. At that moment, Diane must have thought to herself, this is it, the beginning of the end for Hank Hippopopoulos. But things don't pan out like she'd hoped. She was set up, and when meeting up with the assistant she thought would be alone, she is instead met with the assistant with Hank Hippopopoulos. And oh boy does his demeanor seem to be a lot scarier. A large, menacing presence. He warns Diane to stop, that she'll only be hurting herself and the people close to her. She responds to him, showing resolve to his intimidating demeanor. She tells him that she knows the real him, and he says,
Sweetheart, everyone knows who I am. I'm Hank Hippopopoulos. Who the hell are you?
Oh boy.
Something tells me he definitely is not innocent. Who knows, I might be wrong, but something just gives me a little feeling that he's not. He seems a little guilty. I don't know what it is, but I'm getting a very guilty feeling.
This entire episode has clearly meant to be a reflection on real life, an example of men, more often than not, that are extremely powerful, that have used that power to get away with horrible things, and were protected by the media in which they likely paid handsomely. A tale of evil in the world, and just how corrupting a commodity like money and power can be when in large quantities and in the wrong hands. Diane returns to Amanda, informing her that she wasn't able to get anything on him. And just like that, Amanda's tune completely changes from being an asset to Diane to no longer supporting her, after she'd been told by her bosses to refrain from publishing anything scathing against Hank Hippopopoulos, given that he is a great source of profit for her bosses. Damn, he really is powerful, isn't he? See, this just goes back to what I was referring to earlier about the human psyche. Once the truth coming out about Hank Hippopopoulos could hurt her, she showed just how much she cared about the truth and finding justice for the victims. Or should I say how little? Depends on your perspective. But it seems it was all a numbers game for her. After the disappointment with Amanda, Diane is with BoJack. Public hatred towards Diane is now at an all-time high. Diane has lost for now. BoJack urges her to just give up, confused as to why she even bothered trying. Diane is hurt and just needs someone by her side when everyone else seems to be against her. She asks BoJack if he actually believes Hank Hippopopoulos is innocent. He doesn't, but BoJack has been in the game for all too long and knows just how powerful someone like Hank Hippopopoulos is. He doesn't think Diane has what it takes to bring him down, and that if she keeps trying, it will bring nothing good to those around her. She tells BoJack she can't understand why he can't ever take her side. He responds by saying,
I am on your side, and I am telling you, you're not gonna win this thing. Also, P.S., when have you ever been on my side?
He then referred to his biography that Diane wrote, and finally expresses his feelings and why he's been unable to let it go, despite that book being the precursor to all the recent opportunities he's had, and rejuvenating his once dead career. Diane never apologized, and that hurt BoJack. He acknowledged that it's thanks to her that he has the opportunities he currently has, but is saddened by the fact that she hasn't at least apologized for what he felt, especially at the time, was a huge betrayal from someone he had considered a friend. She expresses her regret for how she handled this situation and recognized that she could have gone through things a lot better and apologizes for hurting his feelings. She calls on BoJack to be by her side, and BoJack concedes to her request and says, well,
okay.
Oh yeah, let's not forget about Todd's subplot in the episode. The Republic of Cordovia's prince was visiting Los Angeles while his country was going through civil war. And guess what? He just so happens to look exactly like Todd. Todd, being Todd, manages to get himself into a rather sticky situation, and he says at the end a genocide may or may not have been perpetrated in his name. What on earth, Todd? I'm getting ahead of myself. At some point earlier in the episode, Todd and this prince trade places, as the prince looks to escape the pressures of royal life and wants to experience the less demanding American life. He ends up later going back to his homeland, and Todd is now left worrying about the ramifications of the nonsensical situation. Later that day, while Diane gets back home with Mr. Peanut Butter, Mr. Peanut Butter bears his feelings about Diane's action, upset that despite asking her not to carry on with what she was doing, she proceeded to do what would put his job in jeopardy, as well as the both of them in potential danger. Puzzled as to why she had to be the one to expose him. Why her? He then says to her that perhaps going to Cordovia would be the best thing for her, to do something she is passionate about, and that perhaps the both of them need space. She asks him if he really wants her to go, and he responds by saying, why does it suddenly matter what I want? We cut to the next scene. Diane is sat at the airport, huge Toblerone for Sebastian St. Clair at hand, looking down and defeated. In the background, the news plays. And it's just icing on top of what can only be described as a shit cake. We start episode 8, and BoJack is preparing to be a guest star in the new show that Mr. Peanut Butter will be hosting. We get to see this really cool tracking shot with 2D animation, and I absolutely love the way it looks. This is going to be the first episode of this new game show, and it's a big deal for Wanda. She initially worries about just how seriously BoJack is taking it, and is concerned by how little he seemed to actually care about it, and how nonchalant he was. But BoJack was pretty upfront about the situation, straight up telling her that he doesn't care about it at all, and only agree to it because he cares about her. How brutally sweet and honest. That's good enough for Wanda, and she tells him to break a leg for what will turn out to be an incredibly eventful episode. We're briefly introduced to Mia, a side character that forms, I guess, somewhat of a love-hate relationship with Todd, leaning more towards the hate. She's a young mouse with something to prove. She graduated first in her class from a prestigious university and has worked hard to get to where she is. She rejects Todd and his childlike wonder and imagination. This was the real world, and clearly Todd was living in a fantasy. How he manages to interject himself into situations he has no business being in will never cease to amaze me. The show is soon to commence, and Mr. Salinger, too, has had it with Todd's jovial foolishness. He lets his expectations be known to all his employees. It was showtime, and people had to mentally lock in. He says he anticipates someone standing out above the rest. The individual he is most impressed with by the end of the day will win a pen from him. But this pen also came with a fancy box. Nice. Mia appears hungry to claim this pen as her own, to prove that she is the most deserving. Mr. Salinger finishes his announcement and thus begins the countdown for the game show to air live. Hollywood stars and celebrities, what do they know? Do they know things? Let's find out. The show begins and Mr. Peanut Butter comes out, greeted to a roaring crowd whilst he strikes a pose. BoJack is on standby, ready to enter whenever he's called, having absolutely no respect for Mr. Peanut Butter whatsoever. Then again, it's BoJack. He's never really respected Mr. Peanut Butter, I don't think. Princess Carolyn warns BoJack to play nice, that this was a big deal for Mr. Peanut Butter, and BoJack's not exactly always the best listener. Mr. Peanut Butter introduces him on stage, and without even a moment of brief chit-chat, the game begins, with the first round being called the small talk round. You might have assumed or guessed this already, but this is going to be a game show that doesn't attempt to be comprehensive and make any sense. It's confusing, it's random, and it's all over the place. As the show goes on, these silly antics continue. BoJack gradually becomes more irritated and infuriated by it. We quickly cut to Mia and Todd doing their task to help her behind the scenes. Todd tells her how he miraculously managed to become associate producer of the show. How does he keep on getting jobs? Well, it turns out the reason he got the job was because of his connection to Mr. Peanut Butter. Now Mia, being someone who has worked hard for the things she's gotten in life, felt a little stung by that information. Life can be unfair like that, but she doesn't let that discourage her and makes it her mission to win that pen. To her, it's more than a pen. It's a symbol of all she's achieved and an indication that she has what it takes to make it big. Back to BoJack and Mr. Peanut Butter. Oh boy, is this a wacky show. Mr. Peanut Butter ain't pulling any punches, and he definitely ain't being nice. And when BoJack tries to fire some of his own insults towards Mr. Peanut Butter, it's to no avail. Mr. Peanut Butter was piecing him up and the crowd was eating it up, and BoJack is not happy. He's even referred to as a small celebrity upon getting news that there'd be an additional guest on the show. Harry Potter! Harry Potter, my boy Harry Potter, taking a trip from Hogwarts to play in the game show. Mr. Peanut Butter must understand just how hurtful and mean the things he's saying are. Perhaps he's doing it on purpose and just doesn't care. Maybe this is just pent-up anger that he's felt for a long time, but has just been too polite to say anything out loud. But now it's all coming out. And I mean, BoJack, you haven't exactly been the nicest person to him over the past many years. Perhaps this is just a taste of your own medicine. Just as Daniel Radcliffe makes it to the podium, it's time for a break. BoJack storms off stage, but everyone else rejoices because the show is a huge success. The numbers are great, the feedback is amazing, and the crowd is roaring. It was going exactly the way Mr. Salinger and Wanda had hoped. However, Wanda's not really paying attention to the actual show. She's too busy being amazed by the iPad she's been given to monitor feedback about the show. Sometimes I forget she was in a coma for 30 years. BoJack finds Daniel Radcliffe and says hi, but Daniel mistakes him for a fan. BoJack clarifies that he is not a fan, but an actor as well. But this is not the first time they've met. Before Daniel was as big as a star as he is now, they apparently had a sincere moment that they shared together. That turned out to be a whole crock of shit, and likely a blow to BoJack's ego. Has he truly forgotten who BoJack is? Or has he just been a prick because he feels he's above BoJack now? Come on, Daniel. The game continues and BoJack and Daniel go head to head. While Daniel is asked first grade questions, BoJack is left to answer much more difficult, complicated questions, essentially becoming the butt of the joke in this show. Daniel Radcliffe never even says BoJack's name right. Like, damn. The Daniel Radcliffe in the show is a twat, but blimey does the delivery of some of these lines give me a good chuckle.
Why are we playing for both points and dollars?
Oh, tough break, BJ Novak.
My name is...
Our next question is to Mr. Radcliffe.
BoJack is tasked with an essay question. with a small shed descending from the ceiling over BoJack while the countdown for his essay begins. While BoJack writes away, actually attempting to write the essay, Princess Carolyn sneaks through the back of the shed. Unhappy with BoJack's performance and how rough of a time he was having, she lets BoJack know that Mr. Peanut Butter has a tell. This knowledge arms BoJack with the weapons to combat this unfair attack on him. But it's evident that BoJack is not meant to win. They couldn't have made it more blatantly obvious. BoJack is asked a question this time, and he gets it right. To the surprise of everyone, he isn't meant to get the questions right. Rounds go by and points keep stacking up until it becomes a tied game. The show is thrown to commercials as the team backstage is confused by the turn of events. Daniel Radcliffe questioned BoJack on what on earth he was doing. The deal was for Daniel to win, plug his movie, and win money for charity. But BoJack was compromising those plans, and he was loving every minute of it. During the break, BoJack walks around all smug, proud of himself for no longer taking any shit. Wanda is worried though. The fans are upset and want Daniel Radcliffe to win. The man who played Harry Potter seems to be universally loved, not BoJack Horseman. She asks him to throw the game and lose. After all, he said at the beginning that he doesn't care about the game and was only there for her, so surely it wouldn't mean anything to him to lose. BoJack contemptuously agrees to losing for her. Break is over and we are back on set. Once again, BoJack is asked a question and he gets it wrong. And the insults and scathing comments commence once again. But this time, BoJack seriously had enough. And his agreement with Wanda goes straight out the window. He stops Mr. Peanut Butter and rebuttals with some harsh blows of his own about the fragility of Mr. Peanut Butter's marriage with Diane. And oh boy, does that cause shit to truly erupt. But this was TV gold and Mr. Salinger was absolutely loving it. Mr. Peanut Butter brings seats on stage, one for BoJack and one for him, ready to start what was going to be a heated and drama-filled discussion between the two of them, one that sees certain truths come to light. Mr. Peanut Butter unveils what he's been keeping in for a long time, something that's likely been eating away at him. He knew that BoJack kissed Diane. Diane told him. Wow, Mr. Peanut Butter's really starting to open the blinds to how much BoJack has hurt him. He's unable to understand what had he ever done to BoJack to deserve such discontent and malice. BoJack struggles to answer Mr. Peanut Butter's unearthing question, afraid to speak out the uncomfortable truth of the matter. But he eventually does, and just like I've said in the past, BoJack is jealous of Mr. Peanut Butter. You may be wondering why. So does Mr. Peanut Butter. BoJack is a millionaire after all, an actor in a movie he's dreamed about making for decades. He's alive and healthy, has people that genuinely care about him despite how undeserving of the affection he might be. What on earth does Mr. Peanut Butter possibly have that BoJack envies?
What more do you want? What else could the universe possibly owe you?
I want to feel good about myself, the way you do, and I don't know how.
And there it is. The truth comes out. He's not jealous of any physical possession. The bitterness stems from wishing he too could be as happy as Mr. Peanut Butter. BoJack does not like the man he is, the man he has become, likely feeling like his mother was right. Perhaps there was no finding happiness. Maybe this is simply his destiny. This was the true BoJack, being as raw as he's ever been. Mr. Peanut Butter is taken aback by BoJack's confession, but after being treated so terribly for so long, he isn't sure if he can forgive BoJack. And just like that, another break is called. They do such an amazing job with intertwining the fantastic comedy with heavy, hard-hitting moments and driving you through the journey in such a palpable and captivating way. As Mr. Peanut Butter heads backstage, we see Wanda, and this is a much scarier side of Wanda. She tells Mr. Peanut Butter to go back on stage and forgive BoJack because that is what the audience wants. They want resolution, and Wanda had no intention on letting the audience down.
So you get your little butt back on that stage and you resolve.
Wanda, you're scaring me. How much of anything we see on media is actually genuine? At least Mr. Salinger's having an absolute blast. He's relishing in all the drama. It all makes for fabulous TV. Mr. Peanut Butter returns back on stage after the break, ready to forgive BoJack as Wanda had requested, and just as he was about to proceed, the power cuts off. It doesn't take long before Mia takes notice of a panini machine that had been plugged in the place the power supply was meant to be. Yes, it was Todd, who was trying to fulfill Mr. Salinger's request he had made during the last break for a panini. You see, he's just trying to prove that he too has what it takes to win the pen and prove Mia wrong. Mr. Salinger is so grateful that Mia had solved the problem, so thankful in fact that he awards her with the glorious pen that she dreamed of getting. This was a big deal to her, to prove to herself that she deserves to be where she is and has the ability to make it further. It symbolized so much. Now that the power was back on, we returned back to the main stage where Mr. Peanut Butter resumes his speech, not too sure how much of the forgiveness will be coming from a genuine place. I mean, it was only moments earlier he was completely unsure of what to do. Maybe the accumulation of years of disrespect had reached its limits. Perhaps there is no coming back from this. But this is the Hollywood industry after all, and it isn't known for being particularly genuine and transparent. The fans wanted resolution, then Wanda made sure it happened, be it in a rather scary way. Please, Wanda, calm down. Daniel Radcliffe, seeing all of this, is in utter disbelief at how Mr. Peanut Butter is able to easily forgive BoJack, the man who kissed his wife. Wanda was finally paying attention and heard that BoJack had kissed Diane before, and was visibly surprised by that. Daniel Radcliffe comes up with the brain-dead idea that the only way Mr. Peanut Butter can get payback, I guess, is for BoJack to make out with him. Because at least then Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter would have had the same experience, I guess. What the fuck? So Mr. Peanut Butter and BoJack make out to hopefully heal their friendship. Was it ever a friendship? Mr. Salinger watches from backstage, pleased at the TV gold he had created. Todd is down about the fact that he didn't win the pen, and Mia empathizes with him, and seeing just how low it seemed to make him feel about himself, she decides to give him the pen. After all, it wasn't the pen that she cared about, it was what it meant to her that Salinger felt she was the most deserving of it. Turns out Todd the Little Rascal was straight up playing her, emotionally manipulating her to get her to feel bad for him so she would give him the pen. She tries to explain to him that it was never about the pen, but what it symbolizes. Todd simply doesn't care. He's thrilled to have the actual pen. Todd is a simple man, and in his own mind, he proved Mia wrong. Back on stage after a long make-out session, BoJack is awarded additional points for kissing Mr. Peanut Butter, I guess. How does this game show work? Anyways, BoJack wins the game instead of Daniel Radcliffe. He decides to go double or nothing. But this is where we see the insurmountable extent of BoJack's pettiness and selfishness. In retaliation to Daniel completely saying his name wrong the entire night, which is a complete dickhead thing to do, there was no way he wasn't doing that on purpose. But still, this is for charity. It's bigger than yourself, BoJack. It's bigger than Daniel. BoJack is simply asked to name the actor who played the lead role in Harry Potter. He knew it was Daniel Radcliffe. Daniel Radcliffe was standing right there, but he just pretended like he didn't know. To let that pettiness get in the way of donating $1 million to those in need shows just how vindictive and little BoJack can be. And he does it with a smile on his face. Episode 9. The year is 1972. Secretariat is being enlisted to fight in a war, but pleads to President Nixon to make him an exception. He was Secretariat after all. Imagine all his angry fans. However, a threat of upset fans did very little to ruffle President Nixon. Secretariat is desperate and pleads his case, telling the president that he would do anything. In the next scene, while still in a flashback, BoJack is gleefully watching his idol on TV after he'd just won a race. It seems he's pleased to President Nixon was successful. They must have come to some sort of agreement. Secretariat praises his brother, Jeffretariat, for being a hero and going to fight for the country, as well as praising Nixon for being, and I quote, one groovy dude. So I guess the agreement was Secretariat's brother going in his place. BoJack watches Secretariat so full of joy. He notices that Secretariat is smoking a cigarette, and of course, still being a child, he is easily influenced. He sees some of his mother's cigarettes left on the couch, in her bag. Eager to be just as cool as his hero, he takes one from her bag, lights it up, and takes a swift puff. And at that very moment, Beatrice appears, sternly asking him what on earth he thought he was doing. In panic, he does what any rational person would do by promptly apologizing and trying to put out the cigarette. But in his attempts to do that, he is instead forced by his mother to not waste a perfectly good cigarette and to finish smoking the rest of it. BoJack understandably is bewildered by what he's been told to do. He tells her that he doesn't want to smoke anymore, and she responds to him by saying,
"But I don't want."
And I don't want to be the mother of a quitter. Finish it.
BoJack lights up the cigarette, inhaling the toxic fumes as tears drip from his eyes, confused as to whether this was a punishment for smoking or a punishment for stealing. Beatrice says she's punishing him for being alive, a perfect summary of how he was raised, hated for his very existence in a world he never asked to be born into. Even as an adult, decades later, he carries that feeling of lack of self-worth. However, it's no longer his mother punishing him for merely existing, it's himself. A wounded soul, evidently self-sabotaging by putting himself in situations that will make him more miserable. And the mentality he has on himself reflects outwards to the rest of the world. The scene cuts to the current day. BoJack is smoking a cigarette, staring out into the distance. Then he literally throws the cigarette over the balcony, causing a massive fire that takes the cable out for the entire neighborhood. Good thing Todd was there to call the fire department. You make it really hard to feel sorry for you, BoJack. Anyways, he's conversing with Wanda, telling her about how excited he is to be returning to set. This was the day where he'd be doing the Nixon scene. He'd already told Wanda about this, so Wanda is puzzled as to why he's even called her. He tells her that he'd normally talk to Diane on his way to work, but that Diane was currently in Cordovia.
Well, glad you settled for me because Diane wasn't available.
You bet. Oh man, I'm gonna kill in this Nixon scene. BoJack gonna be in the house.
He arrives at set, and to his dismay, the script has been altered and the Nixon scene stripped away. This was of course blasphemous to BoJack. This was meant to be a pivotal moment in the movie, a moment where Secretariat is morally corrupted, a real deep dive into the dark and uncomfortable parts of him. That is now gone, replaced by a much more festive and happy scene under a Christmas tree. Excuse me, what? It turns out that over the movie's hiatus, they came to a conclusion that people don't want controversial stuff after doing a focus group, essentially removing the true substance of what the film is meant to be about and the difficult questions it's meant to ask, replacing it with something that ultimately doesn't resemble the original story in the slightest, all to avoid tackling the difficult stuff and have the film be more appealing to a wider audience, thus bringing in more money. Because at the end of the day, that's the main thing the higher-ups care about, the money. BoJack can't believe this. This was not the movie he'd been dreaming of making for so many years. Princess Carolyn and Rutabaga are together in a closet after Rutabaga called her over to talk about something private. He's looking for a change, a way out, something new, and through his current divorce process, thought of no one better to join him than Princess Carolyn. Join him doing what, you may ask? He wants to start his own agency and he wants her to be his partner in crime. This would be a huge step, and not one Princess Carolyn is sure she wants. Rutabaga believes this is exactly the type of life she'd love. A life that is crazy, where you are always busy and there's always something to do. But Princess Carolyn doesn't agree with that. She wants a different life, a more peaceful life. But how true is that? On one hand, she comes across as an individual who lives for the hustle and bustle of Hollywood, but simply craves more appreciation. But on the other hand, she says she'd like a far more peaceful life. If that's what she really wants, why doesn't she just go for it? Perhaps, like many of us, she is just unsure about what she really wants in life. In the next scene, we catch up with Diane, who, as mentioned before, is now with Sebastian St. Clair, documenting his life and the unthinkable experiences in Cordovia. We learn more about exactly who Sebastian is and how he came to do what he's doing. He was a man who lived in the lap of luxury, but despite all his possessions, his life still felt empty. With this revelation came the idea to travel the world and help those in need. A very honorable cause indeed. But as the episode continues, we begin discovering more and more about Sebastian's true intentions. We'll get back to Sebastian St. Clair in a bit. BoJack finds Kelsey and talks to her about the script being changed so drastically. I don't think Kelsey is happy about it either. There's only so much power she has, and her input would not reverse the decision. BoJack challenges Kelsey on being complacent with such a change. She tells him that even if she wanted to finish the Nixon scene, that they don't have an Oval Office set. But BoJack comes in clutch and tells her he knows just where one is. He comes up with a plan of sneaking into the Nixon library, where a replica office is. Get this shot, show the producer, he'd love it, and surely it'd be put back in the movie. That was the plan, at least. After a brief bit of contemplation, she agrees to go through with the plan. To execute this plan, they'd first need to map it all out step by step, because the library would be guarded. During the daytime, BoJack, with the aid of Todd, go to the Nixon library, as Todd distracts the guard, who heavily insinuates that he's the lost son of Nixon. As he's getting distracted, BoJack successfully steals a scale model of the library. This would help them in creating a suitable plan. This was going to be a big job, and they'd definitely need some help. Together they gather a team comparable to the Avengers, ready to take on this challenge. Todd of course agrees to help, he's always down to help BoJack. Next is Princess Carolyn, who was just getting comfortable at home, but it's BoJack after all, and we all know she's far too kind to him, so she agrees to help as well. Next person they get is Mr. Peanut Butter, who BoJack then realizes he doesn't actually need. Mr. Peanut Butter convinces himself to join anyways, and BoJack just goes along with it.
You know what? Forget I even asked.
Twist my arm, why don't you? I'll do it.
Okay.
And last but not least, and making a return like a fiery phoenix, we have character actor Margot Martindale. What a glorious return. After only just being released from jail, she's already back to her crazy shenanigans, with BoJack at the wheel as per usual. As they all gather around the table at BoJack's house, we also learn that the library will be crawling with cops, because the scaled model had been stolen by BoJack, who immediately blames it on Todd. This is going to be a big mission, and someone could even possibly die, according to BoJack at least.
Things could get ugly. One of you is very likely to die. Possibly Alan.
Why possibly Alan?
Alan's just a random panda there to repair the cable. Leave Alan alone. But he already knew too much, so now he was part of it as well. The plan now takes action. Todd, Princess Carolyn, Alan, and Margot break into a fine art gallery located near the library, causing a diversion and giving the others a chance to break into the library from the roof. There was absolutely no going back now. As the diversion group walk into the gallery, ready to create a barrier to fight off the police, Princess Carolyn is struck by the beauty of a piece that looked to depict the sort of life that she says she wants. She is starstruck. In the library, Kelsey, Mr. Peanut Butter, and BoJack had successfully made their way inside. Just as they were about to shoot the scene, the security guard appears, guns pointed. They quickly try to explain that they were just there to make a movie about Nixon. This gets the attention of this Nixon-obsessed guard.
What, another leftist screed about how corrupt he was? Or is it about how he had an illegitimate son and the son never knew who his dad was, but he always kind of had a hunch it was Nixon, and then that son grew up to be the security guard at the Nixon library?
They play along with the guard's fantasy, lying and saying it was the latter. They convince the guard that he could be in the film as Nixon. Obviously, he won't be. This gives BoJack an opportunity to still shoot the scene. All he has to do is make the guard believe that he's going to be in the movie. Back to the gallery where Diane still gazes at the beautiful painting of the countryside surrounding a nice, quaint house. The police burst in, strapped and ready, but so is Margot. This woman is crazy. She's unhinged, I tell you. Unhinged.
Return fire! Watch out!
Alan, no. No. But luckily he's saved by his phone that was in his pocket. that he realizes somehow still manages to work as he finds out that his wife is giving birth and he runs off. Okay, good luck, Alan. It was nice knowing you for the short time I did, pal. What a nice lad. While all the chaos is happening behind her, Princess Carolyn is still fixated on the painting and for a moment is transported into another world in her head. She's inside the painting itself. It's peaceful, it's quiet, it's beautiful. It even has a Vanessa Gecko as a maid. Surely this is exactly what she wanted. It was what she claimed she desires. But even in this supposed fantasy land in her head, things start to go wrong. Why? Why was this happening? If Princess Carolyn truly wanted a simple, peaceful, quiet life, she would have it. The realization hits her like a pile of bricks and she snaps out of the daydream. And as the mayhem continues in the background, she walks out, looking unsure and confused with herself. What is it she really wants? Who is it she truly wants to be? Back in Cordovia with Diane, we see the gradual effects that it's having on her. As she takes notes about Sebastian, she starts to get more insight on his true intentions, specifically noting that he loves to talk about himself. Later on, after being woken up by airstrikes and seeing all the death around her and just how little Sebastian seemed to actually care about the people, she confronts him about it. This all seemed to be some big act for him. He tells Diane that maybe she's not cut out for this like he thought she was. But she insists that she could handle it. But can she really? Back to BoJack, who is now in costume, prepared to deliver his lines. This scene requires BoJack to cry, but BoJack can't cry. Or should I say he can't cry in front of other people. BoJack now feels like he's completely failed, apologizing for making Kelsey go through with this only for him to not be able to do it. Kelsey hasn't given up on him yet. She tells BoJack to sit down and begins slowly describing to him the weight and depth of this scene as she points the camera at him. And that was it. She's got the shot. The look on his face was enough. Kelsey tells BoJack that she's glad that they were working together. And in this moment there was true mutual respect, and it was heartwarming to see. Margot is still having a bloody shootout with the cops. Todd had already managed to escape. She ends up getting shot multiple times. What is wrong with her? Blimey. Mr. Peanut Butter gets a call from Diane, who he'd not spoken to for a few days at this point. Presumably she called to tell him that she was no longer in Cordovia. Yep, it turns out she couldn't hack it after all. The thing she thought would give her a greater purpose and make her part of something greater. It wasn't what she thought it would be. The grass wasn't greener on the other side after all. Before she has a chance to say anything, Mr. Peanut Butter apologizes for giving her such a hard time about her trip to Cordovia and tells her just how proud he is of her, that she's actually doing something that matters in the world, making a difference. Now likely flooded with shame and defeat for not being able to complete her planned journey with Sebastian St. Clair, Diane lies to Mr. Peanut Butter. Her voice is filled with regret. There is still 6 months before she's meant to return. Surely she can't keep this lie up for long. BoJack, after a very eventful day, steps out of the library, standing on the edge of the step and lights up his cigarette and cries. All that raw emotion within him, the ones he was scared to show Kelsey, finally came flooding out. Princess Carolyn finds Rutabaga, and after coming to terms with what she really wanted in life, she finally accepted that the quiet life wasn't for her, and she agrees to join Rutabaga as his partner in creating a new agency. And then they start making out. This could be the start of something great, or not. We'll find out. The next day, when BoJack is on set, he realizes Kelsey is nowhere to be seen. He asks the producer where she was, and he lets BoJack know that she was fired because of what BoJack and her had done despite him being against it. They simply wanted to do the story of Secretariat Justice. This whole situation is just a real shame. BoJack doesn't say a word, but his eyes paint a picture, and that picture says 1,000 words. But the word that rang loudest was guilt. Later that day, as BoJack heads home, lost in thought and riddled in guilt, he is met with Diane at his front door. She asks him if she could stay a couple nights. She didn't know where else to go, simply feeling too much shame to confess to Mr. Peanut Butter that she was no longer able to stay in Cordovia. We've reached episode 10. Episode 10. This takes place a week after the events of the prior episode. Diane has now been living with BoJack for a decent amount of time, definitely longer than BoJack had assumed she'd be staying for, and it's starting to earn his and Wanda's relationship. In this episode, we extrapolate the volatile nature that is Diane and BoJack living together, and just how bad they are for each other. Their similarities foster a constant victim mentality and self-loathing. But let's start off at the beginning of this episode. Wanda expresses her dissatisfaction with how much Diane has overstayed her welcome. Diane appears to be in the midst of a deep depression, not taking care of herself, sleeping through the day, being lazy, drinking a lot, simply living a miserable existence. This is the lowest we've ever seen her, and it gets worse as the episode progresses. Wanda has clearly had enough of Diane, and her contempt towards her only grows. Todd's there too, and he just wants to find someone to hang out with, but he's quickly reminded that he has a job. After getting to work, he realizes that, oh no, he actually doesn't have a job because he was fired by Mr. Salinger. But you see, he'd only assumed that Mr. Salinger was joking when he'd fired him. Todd, you are incredibly lucky BoJack literally pays for your entire life. Like, I know BoJack can be an absolutely horrible person, but I'm pretty certain you'd be homeless if it wasn't for BoJack. Anyways, Todd, now jobless, asks Mr. Peanut Butter if he's available to hang out. To no avail. He walks the streets aggravated about his current situation, anxious to find something to fill his time. While walking, he comes across a Scientology sign. From the sign, he felt that it would be perfect for him, that perhaps this was his calling for the day. Just as he's about to enter the building, he's instantly stopped by a man in front of an improv comedy club, who likely saw Todd about to enter the Scientology club and thought he'd be a perfect candidate to join the improv club. Because this improv club, ladies and gentlemen, is nothing more than an expensive cult. BoJack is on the set of Secretariat, and we meet up with him just as he's about to finish his scene. We see just how drastic of a change the script has made. Once aimed to be a dark and gritty telling of the real-life story of Secretariat, it's now nothing more than a soulless fictional movie, which aims to drain as much money as possible from the masses by using Secretariat's name without actually doing justice to tell his life story as the initial script had intended. A sad fall from grace. Since Kelsey had been fired, she was replaced with a new director called Abe. BoJack, who wasn't satisfied with the last shot, hopes to get a better take. He asks Abe if he's sure he wouldn't like to reshoot the scene. Abe insists that any errors can just be fixed in post, and that it just wasn't a big deal, speaking about the film in such a way as though to insinuate he knew how devoid of substance this movie was. That's the impression BoJack took away as well, but this will cause quite a bit of friction between Abe and BoJack in the future.
Chin up, big guy, so we ain't making Casablanca.
For now, Abe likes BoJack. He even invites him over to dinner at his place. BoJack heads back to his trailer and is greeted by Princess Carolyn, dressed like a bloody French detective. She gestures to BoJack to be quiet, then asks him if he'd follow her to a new agency if she moved. BoJack says yes, but unmasks his worries about being taken seriously after this film comes out. He fears that this movie will really tarnish his career. Princess Carolyn lets him know about an opportunity she has for him in a theatre play. He's immediately interested by this. This could be an opportunity for him to act in something that would help his credibility as a serious actor. And it aligned perfectly to when Secretariat's shoots would end. This was perfect. Just the news BoJack needed to lift his spirits. Todd, who had now been introduced to the world of improv, is enthused and enticed by it. To be part of a community, perhaps a bigger purpose, and something to look forward to when he wakes up in the morning. But these people definitely aren't good. And we start to see just how similar this improv group is to a bloody cult. Maybe that's because they are. I mean, they are. I've already clarified that. Later on, when Todd and the improv group are chilling at a bar, and after Todd had paid $200 for what he initially thought would be a free class, he's introduced to Copernicus, who is sat on a table by himself in the bar. He is the founder of Shenanigans, which is the name of the improv group. So to them, he was a big deal. To prove his worth to the improv group, Todd was challenged to improv a lady at the bar. What does that even mean? To which he successfully did, I guess. This must mean he's part of the group now. Congrats, I guess. Visiting Mr. Peanut Butter for a brief moment, he's on the phone with Diane, filling her ears with praise and telling her just how amazing he thinks she is and how amazing what she's doing is. constant praise that will unavoidably cultivate more and more shame, self-loathing, and likely propagate and fester within her the longer she refuses to confront her issues and hides away in BoJack's mansion, lying to Mr. Peanut Butter, lying to herself. It's slowly dragging her deeper and deeper into a dark place, and she better escape before there's no longer a light at the end of the tunnel. BoJack later that evening is at dinner with Abe. He also invited Wanda to come along with him. They're smiling, enjoying good food and each other's company. Well, up until BoJack is asked about what he's doing after Secretariat is done shooting in a few weeks, and he says, after Wanda mentions that he was going to be in a play,
Although I gotta hand it to your husband, it has been a really painless shoot, even though the movie's gonna be a piece of shit, am I right? Did that hurt your feelings? I mean, you're the one who said we're not making Casablanca.
Right, because Casablanca is a movie about a club owner named Rick. This movie's about Secretariat, a racehorse.
I mean, I can't really blame him for thinking that. But it turns out that that's not the case at all, and Abe just happens to make quite literal statements that can easily be misinterpreted as something else. Now, Abe does not at all take kindly to BoJack's words about his work, and in a petty act of revenge, he tells BoJack that there's now going to be reshoots, meaning that BoJack would no longer be able to participate in the theatre performance. There goes any rapport he had with Abe. Back at home, BoJack continues to sulk about how much he hates what they've done to the Secretariat movie, and the fact that now he won't even be able to be part of the theatre show. Wanda is upfront with him, telling him that there's no point in continuously complaining about it and letting it dictate his mood. But Diane walks in with a difference in opinion, pretty much encouraging BoJack to be miserable, to let what's happening with Secretariat be the deciding factor to just how happy he should be. Of course, Wanda is not amused by any of this, letting BoJack know that he really shouldn't be taking any advice from Diane, who clearly doesn't have her life remotely together, and it's clear as day she wants to bring others down to her level so she can feel better about herself. The longer Diane stays, the more toxic and detrimental she becomes to BoJack, as they feed off each other's negativity in a merry-go-round of altruism, self-disgust and depression. Amidst all the tension, Todd tries to strike up a conversation about the improv group he's involved in, but this just results in BoJack and Diane telling him that he's clearly in a cult. He later arrives at the improv group slightly late to one of the classes. They are of course not very happy with Todd's tardiness. We learn that one of the other members, called Brian, who was supposedly being too negative, was sent on a cruise line by Caprinicus. Caprinicus? Why do I struggle saying his name? Anyways, this cruise line sounded quite sinister. Definitely getting cultish cruise vibes right there. Todd explains to them how his best friend BoJack thinks that he's in a cult, and they don't really do a good job in disputing that claim. But of course, Todd is once again too naive to notice. At the end of the day, this is really Todd just looking for appreciation and a community, since most of the people in his life are too busy with work or their own personal lives. Unfortunately, in Todd's search for that sense of community, he's been indoctrinated into a bloody cult. BoJack walks out to his back door where he sees Diane. BoJack asks her how much longer she intends on staying, and it's around this time that we see just how toxic of a match these two are together. Instead of encouraging each other to improve, they instead encourage each other to be miserable. Diane emboldens BoJack's urge to forego his responsibilities, asking him why he even bothers going to work if it's something he doesn't want to do, and then inviting him to join her in her wallowing. Like an infection, Diane has convinced BoJack to come down to where she is. Misery loves company, and she finally had company. She had set out to make a difference, sure within herself that her journey with Sebastian St. Clair would bring forth fulfillment in her life. It meant so much to her and was the cause of many arguments between her and Mr. Peanut Butter. But in the end, like she said, she just wasn't the person she thought she was, and felt like she just wasn't as strong as she thought. Knowing that is a hard pill for her to swallow. Wanda is becoming more and more angry towards Diane and worried that she's only going to be a toxic influence in BoJack's life, that the longer she stayed, the worse the situation would get. Wanda asks BoJack if he'd gone to work, and thanks to Diane's encouragement, he did not. Todd invites BoJack to his graduation ceremony. This would mean a great deal to Todd. As we all know, Todd views very highly of BoJack. BoJack showing up would be a great way to show Todd that he values their friendship. Then again, Todd is in a literal cult. What BoJack should really be trying to do is save him from it. Shortly after, BoJack gets a call from Princess Carolyn, who warns him that he'd better get back to work or risk being sued by the studio. He finally picks himself up and realizes that he needs to work. In the next scene, we see BoJack finally back on stage, shooting a scene for what he likely doesn't even recognize as Secretariat anymore. Constantly asked to repeat takes over and over and over again by Abe. This was his payback. And it was a truly miserable existence for BoJack. So true do the words in the take that BoJack is trying to capture correlate to how he feels inside.
I'm tired of running in circles. I'm tired of running in circles.
Let's get it 10 more times.
He's tired of running in circles. After what must have felt like a terribly long day at work, BoJack returns to Diane still miserable as ever, and he proceeds to join her in her misery once again. Wanda, however, has had enough of what she's seen. She calls BoJack over to their room where she's planned a spontaneous trip in hopes to refresh BoJack's mind and get him away from Diane's influence. BoJack had no intention of trying to be positive and trying to have a better outlook. He's just content with complaining and being miserable and not making any effort to do what would positively impact his life. No, that would be too much work, and as we've come to learn, as self-aware as BoJack can sometimes be, that self-awareness doesn't translate to him taking the right steps towards a better life. In fact, his actions would suggest that BoJack simply enjoys being the victim, simply enjoys being miserable. Now, and I know that's not exactly the case because the mind is a very complex and convoluted thing. He has the resources to get help. He has the resources to do better. I'm sure he knows that surrounding himself around certain things only makes him worse, but he simply doesn't want to put in that effort. Let's be real, people. Getting better and improving in life, you have to put in hard work. You have to graft. You have to truly want it deep, deep down. BoJack says some really awful things towards Wanda, the person that's been trying to desperately elevate him out of his own self-destruction. And like most things in BoJack's life, he destroys what he has with her. Wanda didn't deserve this, and he doesn't deserve Wanda. The end of BoJack and Wanda. He tells Diane what had just happened, but let's be honest, Diane doesn't care. She's not cared about how Wanda felt the entire time she's been here. She's only cared about herself recently. BoJack finally asks her straight up, why doesn't she want to go home? And she lets it all out. BoJack lets her know that the longer she refuses to confront Mr. Peanut Butter, the harder it will become. But she already knows this. She already knows she's only making things worse for herself. She's letting her embarrassment of having to admit she was wrong create a potentially greater crater in hers and Mr. Peanut Butter's marriage. She follows up by asking BoJack if he would have been happy if Secretariat had never changed, or if he'd had the opportunity to perform at the theater. Would that have made him truly happy?
I mean, for a little bit.
And if Kelsey didn't get fired and you got to make the Secretariat movie you wanted to make, would that have made you happy?
For a little bit. But then, probably.
She then asks BoJack when was the last time he was actually happy. It then cuts to BoJack driving to who knows where. But at the very end of the episode, we learn exactly where. He's going to visit Charlotte, someone from his past when his life would have seemed much more simple, where even if he wasn't truly happy, he was at least a lot more hopeful. As BoJack ventures to find that hope and happiness, Diane only further distances herself from Mr. Peanut Butter. And as far as Todd, he just wanted to see his best friend, but BoJack was nowhere to be found. So we've made it to the infamous episode of this season. The episode that was a major turning point in how people viewed BoJack's character. The episode that made a lot of people lose any sort of sympathy for BoJack, where he truly became the bad guy, despite all the horrid things he'd already done in the past. But, we'll get to that. He takes Charlotte up on her offer that she gave him during Herb's funeral. They end up meeting up and Charlotte is rather surprised to see him. She invites him over to her place and we learn that she has an entire family. Yeah, 2 kids and a husband. I don't think BoJack had put that in his equation when deciding to drive all the way to New Mexico to see her. For the first time in the entire season, we get to see a completely different intro to the episode. One that wasn't at all centered around BoJack and his inner turmoils and the monotony of his life. Instead, one filled with light, positivity, and joy. This was an intro about Charlotte's family, and quite the obverse life that BoJack and Charlotte lived, if the introduction is anything to go by anyways. Charlotte was actually happy. She had a loving family, a roof over her head, and food to eat. She seemed content, and she seemed fulfilled. A quite stark difference to BoJack. He was still very much poor in spirit. No amount of money can fix that kind of poverty. BoJack seems quite taken aback by the new life Charlotte had forged for herself. She'd completely put her past in LA behind her. Her kids weren't even aware she'd ever lived there. BoJack seemed all jumbled up by the dynamics of this family and just sits there. They become curious as to why BoJack is actually in New Mexico. Sure, Charlotte said he could call her if he was ever there, but there was no way he came all this way just to see her. Did he? Their daughter is asking inquisitively. BoJack is put on the spot, unsure of how to answer the question. He immediately goes defensive, forcefully laughing at how crazy it would be if he had driven all this way for a woman he hadn't had a real conversation with in 30 years. A woman who had a family and was in a loving marriage. Of course, that's totally not the type of crazy shit BoJack would do, right? He now has to quickly think up a lie, something that sounds convincing. The best he could do was say that he was there for a boat show. That was for celebrities and the big shots. BoJack lives in Los Angeles, which is right on the ocean, as Charlotte's daughter Penny points out. She's clearly not buying whatever BoJack is selling, curious as to why he would come all this way, all the way to New Mexico, for a boat show. Luckily, he's saved by his phone ringing, and it's Princess Carolyn, who he claims to be his boat guy to the family. He quickly takes himself outside, now on the phone with a slightly confused and very frustrated Princess Carolyn. BoJack was just missing days of work, and he was warned that he'd get the pants sued off him. But BoJack refuses to go back home yet. This was a different life than what he was used to, and he wanted to experience it for just a little while longer. He asks Princess Carolyn to buy him some time, a few days perhaps, just to at least get a good taste of this sort of life. But BoJack was still to let her know when he was actually coming home. But I don't think BoJack knows that himself. Charlotte pops out to see BoJack, and BoJack swiftly ends his call with Princess Carolyn. Charlotte grabs BoJack's hand and tells him to make himself at home, to which BoJack responds by saying he wouldn't want to impose and offering to help out in any way he can. Before leaving LA those many decades ago, there was definitely some connection between BoJack and Charlotte. Will that said connection be reignited all these decades later? Let's just hope he doesn't do anything stupid. Who am I kidding? Most of you watching this already know what's going to happen, and no amount of hoping that nothing happens will change what occurs later on in this episode. Someone call Doctor Strange. Maybe he can find a universe where BoJack isn't so damn stupid. Let me not get ahead of myself. Charlotte's daughter, Penny, comes bursting through the door, complaining about how her dad was meant to take her for driving lessons after school, but was instead now taking her brother to his basketball game. Penny insists that it's important that she practices every single day, as she's eager to get better so she won't be the only senior who doesn't have a driver's license. There were no other options for her, except for BoJack. Penny asked BoJack if he could take her since he was an adult and he could drive. Charlotte is okay with it. He'd be doing Charlotte a huge favor, and he did offer to help any way he could. So he agrees to take Penny on a driving lesson before the imaginary boat show. We cut to the next scene with BoJack and Penny, and as BoJack instructs her during the lesson, he also thinks it's suitable to interject a really inappropriate question, asking Penny if her parents actually love each other or if it's just a case of them being together for the kids type of deal. BoJack plays it off and says it's just a typical small talk question. Okay, sure BoJack. Typical small talk question, you like, how you doing? The weather's looking good today, isn't it? Oh yeah, do your parents actually love each other, or is it just a case of them being together because of you? BoJack notices that Penny kept driving past a particular house. Turns out she is essentially stalking her crush, waiting for him to come out of his house just to act like them meeting was a complete coincidence. You see, prom was in 2 months and Penny is infatuated by this lad, deeply hoping he takes her to prom. BoJack glares with a look of disapproval and she challenges him once again by asking him why was he actually in New Mexico. She knew he'd been lying, and to my surprise, BoJack is actually honest. He didn't like the person he was in Hollywood, or Hollywood. He didn't know where else to go. He urges Penny not to tell her parents, and Penny is really understanding about the situation, but brings up the fact that people aren't going to believe him for long if he doesn't actually have a boat after going to the boat show. Her crush that she's been stalking on comes walking out of his front door and she speedily drives away headfirst into a sign, crashing BoJack's already bent up car. She asks BoJack not to tell her parents that she'd crashed his car, and a deal had been made. Penny would keep BoJack's secret and he would keep Penny's. Returning back to Charlotte's house, a gigantic boat is backed into the house driveway. BoJack had to keep up appearances. He junked his car because of course the thing was absolutely totaled now. Charlotte and the rest of the family are excited and in awe of BoJack's new boat. You even had Kyle, the father, acting a little frisky.
Oh, she's a good girl. I can tell. She's a good girl, isn't she? Or are you a bad girl?
Are you flirting with my boat right now?
Nah, just kidding around. I'm kind of the comedian of the family.
This guy is a good laugh, honestly. Penny comes up with the brilliant idea for what BoJack should call the boat. Escape from LA. I know, right? Very fitting. I guess this was it. BoJack had done what he supposedly came here for. He got in a boat and he went to the boat show. Now surely it was time for him to leave and get back to his regular life, face real life and stop hiding away from it. Charlotte, however, doesn't want BoJack to leave. The entire family loves BoJack. Perhaps this was the life BoJack needed, not all the fame and money and stresses that come along with that. Perhaps this was his way of achieving fulfillment. Charlotte tells BoJack that he's welcome to stay as long as possible, and let's just say that's an invitation that BoJack did not refuse. He gets a call from Princess Carolyn trying ever so desperately to pull him back into reality and to have him face his real life, but BoJack doesn't care. He's finally found something that he believes will bring him real happiness. Let's not forget it's BoJack we're talking about. And as we've been shown many times before, BoJack is not really the type of person to learn from his past mistakes. 2 entire months go by. Yes, you heard me right. And BoJack still has not left. Crikey, they must really love BoJack. I'm honestly surprised that he still hasn't fucked anything up at this point. But there's only so long that will last. BoJack has now fully integrated himself into the family, essentially being like an uncle. He sleeps in his boat and then joins the family during the day. He seems genuinely happy. He seems content. Penny, being the teenager she is, going through typical teenage things, is in a bit of a mood and storms into her room during a family meal. You can just tell how damn close BoJack has really gotten with his family. As Penny storms away, he says he's going to talk to her as well as Charlotte. He truly has become part of the family. It turns out that her distress is because she doesn't have a date to prom. Diego, the guy that she was stalking 2 months prior, never asked her out to prom like she'd been hoping he would. She had no one to go to prom with and didn't want to go alone. BoJack seemed to be really enjoying this family dynamic he was now a part of, almost like he was living the life of that horse from horsing around. This was a healthy family relationship, something he had very little experience with, other than when it was acted out in horsing around. BoJack comes up with an idea of how to get back at Diego, I guess. He says this is a good idea because everybody loves BoJack, and doing this would surely make Diego jealous. She'd get the payback by making Diego jealous by how much fun she's having, and she'd have someone to go to prom with. Now look, I'm assuming BoJack didn't have any ill intentions when suggesting this. He probably thought, you know, he'd chaperone her and her friends to prom, make sure they had a good time, and ensuring that they all got home. I'm sure that was his initial plan and he had no intention for the night ending the way it does. But oh boy, does BoJack fuck up big time. You just had to fuck it up, BoJack, you irresponsible bastard. The evening begins. After mandatory prom pictures were taken of BoJack, Penny and her 2 friends. Pete Repeat, he's a cool guy who's got that name because he literally repeats everything twice. And he sure likes to let everyone know that. And Maddie, who is Pete Repeat's girlfriend. Penny drives them to prom, and already BoJack starts making irresponsible decisions. After catching Maddie drinking vodka from a flask, instead of taking it off her, he decides to instead get them bourbon and cut it with water, so at least if they get drunk, they're doing it with a quality drink. This man is literally encouraging them to drink. It genuinely feels like BoJack is trying to live out this weird fantasy as a cool uncle, or perhaps trying to live out a prom fantasy because, I don't know, because maybe he never really got to experience a prom. In the process of trying to be cool, he's simply not caring about the fact that he is responsible for the care and safety of these 3 teens. He's meant to be the responsible one. He's far more interested in being seen as cool. When they get to the prom location, BoJack is unsatisfied by it. After getting embarrassed when trying to liven up the place, he says this.
Yo, now boys and girls, if you want to do the BoJack, take your hands and put them on your... This sucks!
This guy's bad!
Oh, no, God, no, this is not the immediate praise I expected.
This really just comes across like him trying to live out some sort of youthful fantasy. I don't know. He takes them all to the middle of nowhere. I have absolutely no idea. He'd taken some balloons from the prom and bought some glow sticks. And whilst in the middle of nowhere, they'd attach the glow sticks to the balloons and let them loose into the sky, lighting up the night skies in beautiful colors. And just for a moment, despite the fact that BoJack was hanging around with 3 teenagers in the middle of nowhere, which is fucking weird, the moment actually seemed somewhat wholesome, as the balloons just floated away. But that feeling of wholesomeness doesn't last very long at all. I could just feel it in my bones. I feel it in my fingers. I can feel it in my soul.
And I've decided that I want to die.
Penny asks BoJack if he'd like to climb the water tower. BoJack is down and they both make their way to the top of the tower. Back at the bottom, Maddie is unable to even stand, completely intoxicated and in a dire state. At the top with BoJack and Penny, she mentions that she's glad that they left the prom, but wishes that she'd gotten to dance. BoJack then asks her if she'd like to dance. At that point, my gut was screaming. Something was gonna go wrong. BoJack was gonna do something stupid. I couldn't help this feeling. It was everywhere, surrounding me like a disease. They dance together as the music plays on Penny's phone, jumping in and out of connection. They gaze into each other's eyes, and then BoJack says this.
This night has been so perfect.
You know, you look just like your mother.
Oh boy, oh boy. Pete Repeat shouts from below, telling them that Maddie was unresponsive. She drank too much alcohol, and it was making her body shut down. BoJack drives them to the hospital, but instead of taking responsibility for the major role he played in this, he coerces Pete into lying about what happened, telling Pete to leave him out of any details, afraid to take accountability and gaslighting a now traumatized teenager and being the cause of his girlfriend almost dying. BoJack, there are no excuses. There is no sympathy here. But you would imagine this was already bad enough. Surely the night couldn't get any worse. It gets much, much worse. BoJack and Penny finally get home. They're at the front door. Penny is battling within herself on whether they did the right thing by just leaving Maddie and Pete all alone. BoJack, being the fountain of shit advice, tells Penny that sometimes as an adult doing the right thing isn't always the best thing. Despite all the craziness that had happened that night, Penny tells BoJack that she had a great time with him, telling BoJack that he's the only person that doesn't treat her like a child. She walks towards him and pecks him on the cheek. BoJack tells her, "You're welcome." And then she makes a move on BoJack by trying to kiss him. BoJack immediately stops her, but she lets him know that this is what she really wants, even trying to convince him by saying the age of consent in New Mexico is 17, which was how old she is. But BoJack looks at her and tells her she doesn't know what she wants. Yes! Thank goodness! BoJack, I was really scared you didn't have it in you to do the right thing. I was terrified. What I was afraid would happen didn't happen. BoJack didn't stoop as low as I thought he might. Those were my thoughts the first time I watched this episode and had gotten to this part. I felt happy that BoJack did the right thing. But little did I know I had celebrated far too soon. The writers really did a phenomenal job taking the viewers on this uncomfortable journey through this episode. You're left feeling fearful of the worst and hopeful that BoJack would do the right thing. Embarrassed at the rejection, Penny storms inside, tears running down her face. BoJack heads to the back garden where Charlotte is sitting down by a lit fire. He explains to her that the night was eventful, of course leaving out all the parts that would literally get him arrested and punched in the face. They both sit by the fire, recollecting on the past, on fond memories. BoJack brings up something that she'd said 30 years ago when she still lived in LA.
See those tar pits? Hollywood's a real pretty town that's smack on top of all that black tar. By the time you realize you're sinking, it's too late.
He questions her current perception on LA and if she still thought that it was a tar pit. And what she said was so poetic, so beautifully insightful that it truly made me take a moment to appreciate the amount of heart and passion and quality that went into creating such an excellent script. Charlotte tells BoJack that she no longer believes that LA is a tar pit. It's you. Meaning it doesn't matter who you are and how far away you run, how long you hide, you can't escape who you are. And BoJack truly is a personification of what she just said. BoJack can hide as much as he wants, he can run away for as long as he wants, but at the end of the day, he wasn't living in the tar pit. He is the tar pit. BoJack opens up to her about making bad decisions and hurting people, and she tells him a joke, essentially telling him to simply stop making bad decisions. It was then that they lock eyes, and BoJack leans in for a kiss. And for a brief moment, she didn't pull away. Then she does. She snaps out of it and stands up, realizing just how messed up this was. She had a family, and she was happy. She was content. But here comes BoJack like a bloody tornado, indiscriminately destroying everything in his path, in search for short-term gratification. He quite simply just doesn't care who he hurts in the process. Let's just bring up a hypothetical. Even if Charlotte did leave her husband for BoJack, how long would that love last before BoJack inevitably poisons it too? Charlotte is too smart to do something so foolish. She realizes all she's got and knows how long and how much work she has put into the life that she's created in New Mexico. Sure, she could have chased short-term gratification with BoJack. I mean, it definitely seemed like at least a tiny part of her wanted to. But unlike BoJack, she looks at the bigger picture. She knows that the family that she has created is where her joy lies. BoJack does everything he can to convince her that this is the right thing to do. Once he realizes that he's failed, begs for her to pretend like it never happened. Charlotte knew there was only one option. BoJack had to leave. He begs her to not make him go back to LA, back to his old life, but he's told to leave in the morning. She doesn't care where he goes, but he needs to be gone. BoJack leaves the backyard and climbs up his boat, ready to go to bed. He's met with Penny, waiting patiently at the top. She tells him that she does know what she wants. BoJack, once again, rejects her advances, telling her to go to bed as he heads to his room. But something I'd noticed was that when BoJack had gone into his room, you could hear him laying on his bed, but without turning off the lights and shutting the door behind him, still leaving the door open for her to make another advance. BoJack has an unthinkable attraction to making his own life worse. I believe he left that door open because he wanted something to happen. This was just another chapter in BoJack's book of self-destruction. Charlotte said when she made that joke, just don't make bad decisions. But bad decisions is all BoJack seems to ever make. As if to say it was a sign from God, one of the balloons that BoJack, Penny and her friends had let loose into the skies finds its way to Charlotte's house. Charlotte follows it as it leads her to BoJack's boat. The music intensifies, and as she gets closer, she starts to hear suspicious noises coming from BoJack's boat. She climbs up the boat and opens the door to BoJack's room, and is met with the foul sight of Penny about to remove BoJack's clothes. BoJack, no, why? What I'd feared had happened, and I was devastated, appalled, and disgusted by BoJack. Charlotte is understandably angry beyond belief. She tells BoJack to get the fuck out of her driveway within the next 10 minutes or she'd be calling the police. And that if she ever sees him around her family again, that she'd kill him. So BoJack leaves, and we hear the normal intro music for the show playing in the background, as BoJack takes a long journey back to LA, back to his old life. This was it. As much as BoJack tried to escape this life and infiltrate the life of Charlotte, he still wasn't able to escape himself. He is the tar pit. BoJack returns home and is greeted with a house that looks like an absolute dumpster. He steps outside his backyard, looking beyond the barriers, staring at the view of LA. It's then that he notices Diane, who is still there. Yeah, 2 months later. She too has been hiding away from her problems. The episode ends as the both of them look at each other, both ashamed, both sad, both empty. Here we are on the last episode, ladies and gentlemen. It truly has been a spectacular season so far, and this episode is a fantastic conclusion to a fantastic season. The episode starts us off with a split-screen comparison to the contrasting lives of Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane. Diane, who on one hand is wallowing in her own misery, and Mr. Peanut Butter, who has been on a journey of vast economical growth in his career. One seemed happy, and the other's misery was undeniable. But behind the scenes, behind all the smiles and behind the roaring sounds of his adoring fans, Mr. Peanut Butter wasn't as happy as he seemed. He misses Diane. In the next scene, we see BoJack looking dilapidated and worn, hanging overboard his boat that somehow managed to get to his backyard in his shorts and clearly foggy-minded, presumably after having a very heavy night of drinking, as the alcoholic beverages beside him would imply. Princess Carolyn had woken him up from his depression-filled slumber, absolutely seething with anger at BoJack's monolithic levels of selfishness. BoJack assumes that she was there to inform him about getting sued, but we quickly learned that her visit to BoJack's place was for a completely different purpose. Turns out that BoJack is also not going to be sued. In his absence, the studio finished the rest of the movie in post. How could they have done that without BoJack there, you may be asking? They merely replaced him with a CGI clone. Princess Carolyn tells him to ask the producer if he wants to know more. Now, the real reason why she was there was to notify BoJack of an orphanage being built in his name using residual income from horsing around, that he had told Princess Carolyn to give to an orphanage as an offhand comment during Herb's funeral.
Well, here's the good news. You know when someone dies, everyone wants to buy their shit? You're lucky you had a piece of horsing around, because this is where the money starts rolling in.
What? I don't want that money. That's blood money.
Well, what do you want me to do with it? 'Cause it's coming.
I don't know. Give it to some orphans or something. I can't deal with this.
Well, those residuals were enough to have a new one built. Blimey, he can't even remember making the comment. At least you can be happy that this is something positive attached to your name, BoJack. We're shown the orphanage, where BoJack is greeted and treated like a king. His portrait is framed, everyone loves him, and the place is named after him. Of course, to them, BoJack was a great man. To do something like this, build an entire orphanage. Of course, we know that that's not the case. They don't know BoJack like we do. He feels uncomfortable because he knows he certainly isn't worthy of being called a kind man. So being seen as a good man for what was essentially an accident leaves him with a sensation of imposter syndrome as clearly reflected through his body language. Let's stop by Todd, see what this chap's been doing all this time. Oh, he's still in a cult, is he? Oh, and he's also been invited to a fun cruise journey. Yikes. Well, we'll talk more about Todd later. Back to BoJack. He's in the producer Turtletub's office, puzzled as to how the movie was finished without him. And oh boy, was BoJack shaking in his boots. This was BoJack's one thing. Out of all the many things he wasn't good at, he could at least say he was an accomplished actor. But now technology is straight up stealing our jobs. Not only was he replaced in the scenes that he didn't do, he was also replaced in scenes that he did do. That's how good the CGI was. Mr. Rutabaga and Princess Carolyn are all lovey-dovey in the following scene, and it's really nice to see Princess Carolyn, for a brief respite, appear genuinely happy. But this is the BoJack Horseman show, and happiness and joy are not allowed in these woods, ladies and gentlemen. We soon start to learn of Rutabaga's shady ways. I knew there was something off about him from the very beginning. Call it intuition. He's divorcing his current wife, or at least that's what Princess Carolyn is led to believe. But oh boy, is he a douchebag. Things start getting a little complicated with him and his wife, and it looks like the flames of love between them may have faintly reignited. However, he doesn't immediately make sure Princess Carolyn is aware of this. To uproot both their lives and take on this massive risk, a partnership of love and business. But we all know those don't usually work out so well together. What had just felt like a concrete plan was now starting to look a tad bit wobbly. But he does, or should I say, says something absolutely deplorable in the latter half of this episode. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Todd arrives at BoJack's house to collect some things in preparation for his cult crew's convoy. Uneasiness gradually filled the air. Todd appearing apathetic to seeing BoJack. BoJack asks him how the improv graduation went. Todd reminds him that had happened 2 months ago. BoJack apologizes, unsure of what to say. And and probably everyone, understands Todd's frustrations. He clearly doesn't care enough to actually try, to actually do better, to actually evolve. He doesn't want to change because that would actually take work, time and self-motivation. Todd reminisces on their past together, on simpler times. You can see BoJack's facade oozes an aroma of bitterness about Todd leaving. This was what BoJack had always wanted though, right? In the entertainment world, plans progress with Princess Carolyn and Rutabaga. He comes up with the not-so-smart idea of literally burning all economical and interpersonal bridges at the workplace they were leaving. On their way out of the building, Rutabaga attempts to kiss Princess Carolyn, but she rejects his advances. She ain't the type to share partners. She is not letting Rutabaga manipulate her and waste her time, and potentially break her heart. This is when a real shitty side of Rutabaga comes out, the conceited and entitled side. Essentially devaluing Princess Carolyn down to her age and using it as an argument as to why he's the best she will ever be able to get and she should just be okay with the muddy situation between him and his wife. I always felt he was inauthentic, but blimey, he is an absolute dick. BoJack is at the press screening for his movie Secretariat, a movie where he's completely replaced by CGI, and guess what? The movie was actually good. BoJack is bewildered by this revelation, but saddened above all else. The movie was good. The movie was so good that it's even getting pushed for awards. This would be a huge accomplishment for BoJack career-wise, but at the end of the day, if he did win this award, he'd have to live with knowing he never earned it. And as narcissistic, resentful, and downright bad BoJack can be, he does still have feelings, and he'd feel undeserving. But what BoJack was feeling made no difference. The aim was now for an award. Anna Spanakopta, man, these names are killing me, makes her introduction to the show. She's tasked with the purpose of leading BoJack towards that coveted Oscar award, and she aimed to fulfill that purpose, no matter how reluctant BoJack may seem. During their conversation together, BoJack hits a realization. After essentially being made to feel like no one could ever love him, he contemplated his priorities. It finally hit him. Todd is a person that loved him, despite all his flaws. Todd actually cared about him. It was a strong friendship. His bitterness stopped him from trying to rectify any issues earlier on. Now, about Todd's little shenanigans and journey through the 7 seas aboard a ship, where we see the extent of the brain rot and just how far Todd has been led astray by this false leader. I mean, the guy doesn't even come up with his own improvised lines, and oh boy is that a big deal in this improvisation cult. But there is not much Todd can really do. Any attempt to escape this ship seemed futile.
Copernicus is a fraud! A fraud? Me? How? I had such high hopes for you, Todd. Normally, I'd make a perfectly timed butt joke here, but as you can see, I don't have my book.
We'll get back to these lot in a second. Diane finally steps out of BoJack's house after Princess Carolyn convinces her to get out and actually do something with her life and not just stay at BoJack's place wasting away. She also offered Diane a job role at her agency as a ghostwriter for celebrity tweets. Princess Carolyn states her reason for helping very openly and very sincerely. Princess Carolyn is a fixer, a person who is always more eager to help others that need help before thinking to reflect inward and start helping herself with the many things she has going on in her life. A core reason as to why she's let BoJack hurt her so many times. In the journey of trying to help someone that doesn't want to be helped, it's like a crack that will slowly start to creep its way into your life, and before you know it, all of a sudden, you are just as broken. Later in the episode, Diane is talking to a client in a restaurant. and for the first time in a long time, she had some sort of purpose. But what would you know, by freakish coincidence, Mr. Peanut Butter just so happened to be in the very same place. They lock eyes with each other and Diane is lost for words. I truly can't imagine the different kind of emotions she must be feeling in this very moment. The very same can be said for Mr. Peanut Butter as well. This part of the show really just showed me, despite his own flaws, Mr. Peanut Butter's a fucking great guy. He truly loves Diane, and that is undeniable. And honestly, for how deceiving and hurtfully dishonest that she's been to him, she's genuinely lucky to have a compassionate, understanding and empathetic response from Mr. Peanut Butter. They talk as if what had happened hadn't just happened, making her feel comfortable in a terribly awkward moment.
Listen, I know this sounds crazy, but I think maybe you should get back here so you can help me find the batteries.
Yeah?
I know you're doing important work and it's a long way to travel, but I need you here. And I think you should come home.
What a guy. Returning to Todd, I'll quickly say this entire storyline with Todd and this cult definitely had its funny moments, but it's been one of my least favourite plot lines in the season. A fair bit of the humour was also slightly missed in this subplot as well, surprisingly. I'd initially thought I'd absolutely love this plot point with Todd, but that wasn't really the case. The plot thread does make a good conduit for BoJack's character progression. You know, BoJack realizing just how much he takes Todd for granted, and now that Todd's away with his new cult family, it leads to a dramatic finale chase for Todd that then leads to BoJack and Todd improvising their way through the cult's tyrannical rule. This was of course after BoJack had to remind Todd of who he was, snapping him out of his cultish trance as they pushed through towards their escape. BoJack's boat. The improv cult makes one last attempt to get Todd to change his mind, but BoJack giving a heartfelt speech wins Todd's heart, and they both escape together.
Letting you stay with me was the best thing I ever did on purpose. And I don't think I ever told you that, but I should have. Because you're my best friend, Todd.
Finally now, he may start appreciating Todd's friendship. The episode draws towards an end. BoJack's orphanage is now named after Herb. Unfortunately, it turns out that there was a spelling typo and that Herb's name was spelt wrong. Even the one great thing he managed to do by accident, something still had to go wrong. Fate can be cruel. Let's not forget about Princess Carolyn, of course. Thankfully, she kicked Rutabaga to the side, realizing that she deserves better. She was cold in her approach about it though. After the both of them had left their old jobs and burnt bridges, she decides she can no longer be with Rutabaga. And given that the business was entirely and completely under her name, ice cold baby, ice cold. Hopefully next season will be a brighter one for Princess Carolyn. For all the characters, to be honest. But come on, it's the BoJack Horseman show we're talking about. We know the drill, lads and lasses. The last scene of the episode is a full circle back to how the season initially began. BoJack taking steps towards becoming a better person, mentally and physically. He runs up the hill outside his house, absolutely struggling. This is the same hill that we see a particular man. That said man just so happened to be running up as BoJack was attempting to do the same. He sees BoJack struggling, and what he says is so simple and so beautifully poignant.
It gets easier.
Huh?
Every day it gets a little easier.
Yeah?
But you gotta do it every day. That's the hard part. But it does get easier.
Okay.
Every single day, it gets easier. The hard part is doing it every single day. Oftentimes in this fast-paced world, we look for the quick solutions to things. But some things simply take time, and they take hard work, and they take consistency. You are human, and there will be times that you fail. But like Rocky says in the movies, it's not about how many times you fall, it's about how many times you fall and can pick yourself back up. The true key to actual change is wanting to change. Truly, deeply, passionately wanting to change. Not just saying you want to change. Sure, you may stumble, but you've just got to keep moving forward. For many years, BoJack has accepted his fate at the bottom of this hole. We can only hope that he finally makes the decision to actually take the hard steps towards change, putting one foot in front of the other in search for fulfillment within himself. Whatever the process may be, do not feel ashamed if you've had bad days, if you failed, if you feel like you aren't making the type of progress you think you should be. Just don't let the bad days keep you down. Use the struggle, use the pain as motivation to get yourself out of the situation you're in for your own sake. And just keep going every single day, and it will get easier. We'll all be okay.